You ready for this one? I'm about to blow your mind, buddy.
Okay.
I worked for RT America. They were going to give up nukes, but NATO wasn't going to expand anymore.
No, that wasn't part of that. There is a...
Are you sure? There was one where it was
positive.
NATO wasn't going to expand anymore. There was one of them.
There is a quote that was given by Secretary of State James Baker to, I believe it was to Gorbachev, and it had to do with Germany. This gets quoted all the time. That Mearsheimer loser quotes it too, okay? There's a quote, and the quote is "not 1 inch eastward." And that quote,
right, yes.
That quote was particularly referring to the reunification of East and West Germany. And the worry was that if Germany reunified, that NATO would begin to move armed forces into Eastern Germany. And that's why Eastern Germany, I think to this day, although it might have changed in the past few months, had remained demilitarized.
First things first, how did you find me?
I imagine it's probably similar for you, where when you reach a certain size on the internet, you've got like fans that link you at, like just a ton of stuff whenever things are happening. So if somebody mentions you, oh, actually, well, no, you just said that's how you found me, right? Is that a fan was like, Destiny's watching you. And then it's the same with me. It'll be like, oh, somebody's talking about you, or somebody's talking about this or whatever. And, yeah.
So I've actually been doing a lot of research, because just kind of being in the TV world, I kind of would try to watch as much streamers as I could. I would watch you, I'd watch Dave Pacman. I watch everybody, hence like the Faran Balanced thing. But I would watch from you to Ben Shapiro to Dave Pacman to H3H3 with Hassan Piker and Ethan Klein. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, Candace Owens. I mean, I watch them all. But I had kind of missed the boat on this whole Keffals thing that was going on. And a lot of people kind of right now have seen me rise just from the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. I got to know a lot of the law tubers, which I feel like there's a lot that are on the right for sure. There are some on the left as well, but kind of give my audience a little bit. And if you're on my locals, you saw this too, kind of the backstory that we were looking at. But when did this whole Keffals thing start?
Well, when you say this Keffals thing, can you be a little bit more precise? Like,
okay.
Yeah, because there's a lot of Keffals things.
I guess, okay, so for those that want the full story, you do have your Keffals manifesto, which excellently done. But I guess, how did she first come on your radar, and how did you first come on her radar?
So I was streaming someday. I don't think we were doing anything in particular, but I was basically streaming someday, and I think somebody linked me like a tweet from somebody that was like quote tweeting her ratioing somebody else. And I think I quote tweeted that and was like, this is really cringe. Like something like that. That was basically it.
Right.
And then I think she saw that tweet, and then somebody in her chat erroneously said that I was like hate rating her stream like 2 hours before I'd even tweeted at her or knew she existed. She blamed me for a hate raid that she got that had like 10 people show up, and then said that she fixed it by banning everybody that followed me in my community, and just started making up shit about me. And I was like, oh, okay. And that was like our first like introduction to each other. And then we started to fight a lot, I think that day and the following morning. And then that following day that after I discovered who she was, I got banned from Twitch for stuff related to, I think, trans stuff, but I'm not 100% sure. They don't really tell you why you get banned, so yeah.
And that's one of the things that I've noticed is that the ban thing is like, you know, it's like I can ban you because I'm trans. And like I said, I've seen this debate happen recently with, again, Nick, who's a friend of mine. We don't agree on a lot of the same things. I'll tell you that right now. Because like I said, I don't know if you're streaming this to your audience as well, but we don't agree on a lot of the same things. But the one thing that I did notice, though, is here it's somebody, I mean, I would assume that you're completely on the opposite political spectrum of Nick Rekieta, but that she had done it to you. I don't want to assume, but, you know, I would have, but that she had done it to somebody completely on the opposite side of the political spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't, when it comes to the online cancel wars, they'll kind of go after anybody. There's not like only one political side they'll go after. They'll go after whoever they deem to be like an enemy of whatever their movement is, yeah. Right,
so we knew that you were at TwitchCon. We knew that Keffals was going to be there. Talk to me a little bit about what happened, because there's all these different stories that are going on, you know, of, oh, she went up to Destiny's wife, blah, blah, blah. Like, what happened? What went down?
I think that basically she went up to my wife and she said that like, you need to tell your husband to back off, and if he doesn't, I'm gonna take his YouTube channel down or something. Basically that, at like some random TwitchCon party.
Mm-hmm. And with a lot of these creators that are out there, I mean, does that happen all the time?
No, that's pretty.
Ban you?
Yeah, no, that's pretty rare. That doesn't typically happen. Yeah, that's a pretty exceptional interaction, but.
So then your reaction to it?
Well, I mean, I wasn't there, so I couldn't say anything. But I mean, it's kind of annoying.
But I mean, like, yeah, just kind of your reaction as to when you first heard this from your wife.
I mean, it wasn't really surprising. They seem like those kinds of people. Like, it's pretty annoying, but I mean, there's not much I can do about it. So yeah, just yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she contacted somebody like from Twitch to say like, hey, this is kind of weird, and they're like, oh, okay. But I mean, there's not much they'll do about it. So.
Right. Now, the one thing, too, that I found very interesting just about you and when I've been watching you, too, is I like your style in the sense that you're not afraid to ask questions. You're not afraid to kind of do your deep dives, hence the Keffals manifesto. Kind of to give like my audience a little bit of background, because a lot of people were like, well, who is Destiny? And I'm kind of new in this whole YouTube space. For your audience, I've been more of a news anchor on the news side of things. And kind of giving a little bit of a background on you. I said that, that you started, I think you're actually a year younger than me, but kind of what got your start on the internet and why did you choose the internet? As far as gaming and all that, how did you get into all this?
I mean, my foray into the internet was internet streaming. Well, into this world was I started streaming in 2010 off the recommendation of a friend, and it was playing StarCraft 2. And I was like a semi-professional StarCraft 2 player for probably 2 or 3 years, I think. And that was kind of my intro to streaming and everything.
And you're from is Nebraska considered the Midwest? I don't know.
Are you from Ohio?
I'm Chicago.
Chicago. Oh,
no,
okay.
no, I'm from Illinois, Chicago. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Nebraska's part of the Midwest. Okay.
Sometimes they debate that or not. Sometimes they say
no one debates that except for weirdos who are really far east who try to argue where the Midwest is, like in Ohio. Okay, you're like, no, Nebraska's absolutely part of the Midwest. Okay.
This is true. Well, and I feel like you guys became part of the Midwest officially when Nebraska became part of the Big Ten, right?
I don't talk about football in Nebraska after I was born. Okay, that's just something we don't think about anymore. Okay, I don't know. I don't care what conference we're a part of. We went from an easier one to a harder one, and we lost all the same. It doesn't matter. Okay, we don't talk about football here anymore.
Yeah, I feel ya. I'm a Purdue grad. We don't really talk about it either. Sorry, I don't know why they're saying that my camera is not going well or not. Let me see if I can talk about it either. Sorry, what's going on?
Yeah, it's definitely frozen right now. So
sorry about that. Let me see if I can refresh. Stand by. Stand by. Hey, is that any better?
Yeah, it looks a lot better. Good job.
Okay, all right. Maybe just had a refresh. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I don't know how much you want to get into. Like I said, I'm just thankful that you just, I emailed you and I was like, hey, you sniped my stream. Do you want to talk? And you were like, sure, why not? Which I will say, I think it's great because, again, I'm just a small creator. I'm kind of like a nobody in this space right now. I mean, 25K, I don't think is anything to write home about in, your neck of the woods. But I think that there's a lot of things we probably agree on, maybe some things we disagree on. But as far as Keffals, I'm going to come right out of the park and say it. Again, watching your manifesto, I kind of saw a lot of your ideas on what you were targeted for, what she went against you for. One of the things that right out of the gate that I agreed with, and again, right off the bat, I am not against trans people. I'm not transphobic, which clearly you're not either, but you get labeled that, obviously, from the specific person. But I have, in my time as a news anchor, I've covered a lot of stories where it was a late night hookup, particularly down in El Paso, Texas, where I was a news anchor. It was a transgender woman hooking up with maybe like a guy in the army base or something, because there's a big army post there. Did not disclose genitalia. And there were a couple cases where they were murdered. I believe that it should be disclosed. And that was one of the things that I think you had said, correct?
A little bit more complicated. I think that you should always disclose genitals to a partner. So if you're a post-op trans person, I think it gets a little bit more complicated in terms of like what is your like obligation for disclosing things there, because you get into weird things for like, well, how much of your past should you disclose?
Right.
There's like a whole can of worms. So some people would say like, well, if I was going to sleep with somebody and my partner used to be a woman and now they're a man, or they used to be a man and another woman, I would want to know that. Otherwise, I consider it rape. And it's like, okay, I can kind of see that. But like, I think there's a lot of things that especially men can lie about in order to get laid. And it's like, well, how much of an obligation do you have to know somebody's past when it comes to like sexual encounters? Like if you're a guy, not that any guy would ever dream of doing this, but if you lie about like your occupation, or you lie about how much money you make, and you show up in a rental car or something, and then the girl finds out, like, is it rape if you didn't tell her, you know, how much money you made for real? Or if you didn't tell somebody something about your past, like it just gets really sketchy. So the part of the conversation that I focus on is people should definitely know your genitals before hooking up, 100%. If you've got a penis or a dick or a vagina. Sorry, a penis or a vagina, I should have said. Or a penis or a dick. Maybe some people think different. But yeah, whatever you have, they should probably know beforehand, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things as well that I agreed with, because, I mean, let's face it. One of the things that people can actually be sued for is if you have a sexually transmitted disease, you don't disclose it, and that person ends up with that sexually transmitted disease. I mean, we see it in law. We see it in many different news media stories. So that was kind of one of the things that I agreed with you on. As far as, here's where I think this is probably where we might start to disagree a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Is the state of maybe the economy, the how we feel about Democrats, Republicans. You know, if someone were to ask you, and do you like being called Destiny or do you like being called Steven? What do you prefer?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Because it's like you never know, and I don't want to disrespect her.
Wait, is your name actually Faran?
Faran, yeah. My first name is Faran, yeah.
Okay, cute. Gotcha. Faran Balanced.
And then
okay, yeah.
And I know a lot of people think I'm on the right because of the Faran Balanced from Fox News. Folks, I assure you, there are times where I think it's a brain rot channel, along with CNN sometimes as well. But that's just coming from a media insider standpoint.
Gotcha.
But if somebody were to ask you though, okay, what do you consider yourself as? Where do you lie on the political spectrum? What would probably be your go-to answer?
Man, at this point, because of how kind of strange politics are, the left-right paradigm doesn't work very well to describe a lot of thought. But I would probably say in most conversations, I'm probably like pretty far left, like maybe progressive. It just depends on what community I'm in when I get asked that question. Like if I'm at a college campus with a bunch of young kids, I'd probably say I'm like a center left, like Biden liberal. But if I'm talking like social issues with conservatives, I'd probably say like I'm a very far left progressive person. But it's totally going to depend on the environment and what's being talked about, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you growing up in the Midwest, Nebraska is kind of well known as a red state in many ways. And did that influence? Did you grow up? I mean, if you look at your Wikipedia page, for example, and it says that you grew up and you were very libertarian, but was it that? How much of your upbringing had an influence on your politics, would you say?
I mean, it's like an impossible question. How much of an upbringing influenced you? Like, obviously, probably completely influenced. It was hard to tell where.
Right.
Like when I grew up, I didn't grow up actually libertarian. I grew up very conservative, very Republican, very neocon. Like I read Michael Savage's books. I listened to Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, Billy Cunningham, all these guys on the radio. Yeah, this was the media that I was inundated in. And I was like I remember writing an article for my high school paper about like why we should invade Iraq and like defending like George Bush and everything. I was very, very, very big like neocon growing up. And then in my high school or late high school, early college years, I kind of trended towards like libertarian, probably because I listened to a lot of Glenn Beck and there was that whole Tea Party movement. I kind of followed them a little bit. And then as I got into streaming, my politics have shifted gradually left and left more as time has gone on.
And it's so interesting. And I wanted you to say this for your audience, just because my trajectory is very much the same. Grew up in the second most red county outside of Orange County, DuPage County, right outside of Chicago. Grew up a Rush baby. Everything. I mean, even when I was little, it was, yeah, like USA when we were going against, Iraq and Afghanistan, for the troops, all of that stuff. I mean, I'm still for the troops, but never knew what the word neocon was. Never knew what the military industrial complex and all that kind of those terms were. And then went to college, still Purdue, still very conservative. I went to Catholic school my whole life too, so everything was, super conservative. And then as I started moving around and working in different cities across the country, my eyes were opened a whole lot more. And again, I wasn't on the internet streaming thing. So like our stories are a little bit different, and I'm going to be interested to find out how was it with streaming. But for me, it was moving around the country and seeing like, oh, that whole idea of, oh, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you can do it. And it's like, well, some people don't even have boots or straps. So it was kind of seeing a lot of that.
I agree 1,000,000%. The thing for me was becoming it was funny because even in my really shitty, poor working days before getting to streaming, I was very, very, very conservative. And then as soon as I got to be very wealthy, I started to realize like how bullshit the world was compared to like when I'm rich. It was very easy to make a lot of these fundamental problems go away. And then when you're poor, like a flat tire like destroys you for like 2 or 3 months. It's like the worst thing in the world. So as I gradually became more and more wealthy, I was like, damn, like I have a son who's 11 years old, and it's like, I want him to go to the best school. I'm just going to buy a house in the best school district. And it's like, my son has that opportunity for what reason? He didn't earn it. He doesn't do anything special. Like, no offense, he's 11 years old. He hasn't earned to go to the best school in the best schools in the state. It's just because he's got a wealthy father. And then I see like over the coronavirus lockdown and stuff, you've got some people where they have to like park Wi-Fi vans outside their house just for them to have internet. Meanwhile, my son goes to a public school where they're all assigned iPads that they can take home in like 3rd grade. I'm like, Jesus. Like, the discrepancies really suck. It's really annoying. And then I see stuff like that. And especially like, it's one thing to have like the view of yourself and like, I want the best for me and I want, my own best world and blah, blah, blah. That's one thing. But I think it's another thing to look at it through the lens of being a parent, where I'm thinking like, man, it feels really good that I can basically give my son like whatever he wants or needs in terms of like finances or where he needs to go to school or whatever like that, opportunities. What if I was like a really poor working parent and I saw that my child was struggling and there was really nothing I could do for him? That would be like the worst feeling in the world. Yeah. So I think having a son definitely like changed some of the ways that I viewed some of the imbalances in the world, where it's like, sure, if things are unfair for me, that's whatever. But like if things are unfair for somebody's kid and they don't have much of an ability to wiggle or change anything, it super sucks.
And that, I will tell you, is the biggest thing that I saw when I was moving around the country, and I was seeing it particularly in South Bend, Indiana, home of Mayor Pete, covered him a lot, and El Paso, Texas, where I covered Beto O'Rourke a lot. But you see a lot of these minority families where, they live in these, as you said, like these shitty school districts. These other people can afford to move to the better ones, but the ones that can't, they're stuck in these shitty school districts. They don't get those iPads. I mean, there were kids, I did a story about kids going to McDonald's for their Wi-Fi to do their homework.
Yeah.
Here's the part of the problem is, and I feel bad looking back now, it was all about how wonderful McDonald's is to offer free Wi-Fi for these kids. And it was like, what was I thinking, But that's kind of what happens when you're in the media today, or this was probably about 6 or 7 years ago now, but kind of this landscape as it's progressed, and you look back and you're like, oh my God, I was praising the corporation, not being like, why is nobody helping these kids, just in general.
Sure.
But a lot of it too, though, was journalism, you don't make a lot of money. So our paths, again, are very different, where I started making, I grew up in a very comfortable home, went to some of the best schools, thank God for my parents. And the whole thing that was ingrained, we worked hard. Well, I was busting my ass making $26,000 a year with a college degree. And I started to realize what it's like to be fucking poor. And what happens there. So I just find like the kind of the opposites happening. But like the one thing that I will say that I think is very interesting is I don't know if you're very familiar, or I'm sure you're obviously familiar with Jimmy Dore, but how much you agree or disagree with him on. But that was kind of one of the first people that I started watching that was, quote, very far left progressive, where I was like, he's bitching about a lot of the same things that my parents are bitching about, who are very conservative. And it was like, wait, he's also bitching about AOC and a lot of the squad and what they're not doing and what they should be doing. Saying that you're progressive. And again, I don't really, I always say, I think there is really no party that speaks to me personally. So I can't really define it, but I would say there are times where I'm very center left. There's times where I'm very, very center right as far as more the financial stuff. But then there's times where I'm center left. Like, I believe that kids should have access to college, which is not a Republican thing.
Sure.
So I'm kind of a buffet of politics, if you will. But when it comes to progressive ideas and stuff like that, if you said, depending upon what circles you're in, do you think that AOC and the squad are doing a good job since they identify as progressives, or kind of where you are on the progressive party as a whole?
It's opening up a whole other can of worms.
But like I said, I'm very interested because, like I said, I think that what I like about you is you're extremely logical.
Yeah, I try to be. So here's my issue. Oh God, I hate Jimmy Dore. Here's my issue with Jimmy Dore and his analysis
let's discuss.
of the progressives. Yeah, so he was part of this whole ultra cringe. Am I allowed to cuss here, or do you prefer no cussing?
Oh, absolutely, go for it.
Okay,
whatever
he's part
you
of this
want.
incredibly fucking cringe movement called Force the Vote. Okay.
Right. Okay. And
So,
I know that's a big divide with
it's a huge divide.
progressives.
Yes. So if you are incredibly progressive, having like the squad in Congress to kind of advocate for your beliefs is kind of cool. That's nice. You've got some people there that kind of advocate for your beliefs. But the problem is you still represent a minority of U.S. opinion, and you represent an insane minority in congressional opinion. And these people, like Jimmy Dore, I think Tulsi's been on this train, and these other people that are all on this Force the Vote stuff, seem to think that like a few people in the House can have this massive sway over the entire like political composition of like all of the types of legislation we try to pass or legislation we try to pass through Congress, and they can't. They don't have that much power. Progressives always make this mistake in thinking that they're so much more popular than they actually are, and then that's why you see people try to run for Congress and lose, or that's why you see people like the Justice Dems initially backed like 100 candidates and then they changed it to like 7 or whatever. It's why Nina Turner lost twice in a row. It's why Cenk and other people that try to run don't get as far as they do. Right? Progressives always, why Medicare for All didn't pass. It's why 15 an hour didn't pass. Progressives always think that like they have this thought where it's like if we can just introduce our policies to these people, they'll like it. And if they don't like it, it's because they haven't been introduced enough to it. And in reality, everybody's secretly a progressive. But that's just not true. And the very limited representation that progressives have right now in Congress is a really good start. But that's it. The idea that you think you're going to see Medicare for all or 15 an hour minimum wage or these huge sweeping movements because you've got a few people in the House is fucking delusional. And that expectation to be placed on them was just really dumb. I think there's also a general misunderstanding of how Congress works in general, that like the idea, I don't know where you fall on this, but like the idea that like basically what happens is there's a big meeting, all the lobbyists come in, they pay people the most amount of money, and then they go and they vote, and that's how like Congress works. That's what I think. This is like 98% of Americans think that it works this way. And the reality is that when it comes time to whip for votes or wheel and deal on the floor to figure out what am I going to vote for, what am I going to support, what am I not going to support, there's an incredibly like tactical and strategic process involved in doing that. It's one of the reasons why Pelosi is so worshipped in the Democratic Party is because she's a really effective whip. She's good at raising money, and she's good at getting people together to figure out what they're going to vote on. If you want your progressives to be effective in Congress, it's not enough for them to be Twitter activists. They need to be politically effective figures. And being a politically effective figure means that you need to know when to compromise, when to give your vote on something, and you need to know when to ask for something. And AOC, I'm shocked to say this, I originally did not like AOC because she was way too radical for me. She's actually done a really good job at moderating some of her positions and more effectively dealing with other members of Congress, up to and including Nancy Pelosi. You saw their relationship got repaired a lot. And I think that's really good for AOC in her political career. And it's really good for progressives in general, because like, okay, cool. She's further embedding herself in kind of like this congressional machine. She'll be able to make these asks. She'll be able to do the wheeling and dealing. And hopefully in the future, when like big legislation comes up, you've got people who are progressive, who are more effective in Congress, that can kind of advocate in their corner for the types of stuff that they want passed. Sorry, it's a whole thing. Yeah, okay.
No, and people are loving the discussion, and I think this is one of those discussions that need to be had, because there is part of me like where I agree here, where, you know, from Derna, like upstarts cannot kick out the establishment politicians if everyone gives them their votes all the time. So it's one of those things where I totally understand it. And I'm in Chicago right now, but I was living in DC, came back for a little bit, moving back to DC. I've seen how the sausage is made. And one of the things that I find so interesting is this guy, Daniel McAdams, who was the chief of staff for Ron Paul for from the beginning to the end. And he tells this story of where they went into the Armed Services Committee meeting. And, you know, they come in, and here Ron's got a stack of stuff that he wants to start talking about day one. And Daniel McAdams is there getting ready to take notes. And they sit down and they just start bullshitting. And Ron's like, okay, well, can we, you know, are we going to talk about this? And they're like, no, buddy, no, we're not here to do any of that stuff. And that there was just this, like, he said, like, you could just see this, like, layer of sadness that, like, consumed him, because he was just like, they don't want to change anything. They don't want to do anything. And so you have the dichotomy of, yes, you do need to know when to compromise, but at what cost? I kind of came into, again, I don't consider myself a progressive because I'm kind of a buffet, but when I saw the Force the Vote was kind of when I first became aware of the fracture in the progressive party and the progressive movement. And I was like, you know, I do see both sides, but why not try for Force the Vote? Why not try that? Because here are these Democrats, they keep thinking, oh, you know what, we're going to be able to sway them, we'll throw money at them, or we'll run against them. Why not do that? You know? Yeah,
so the reason why not is because progressives have absolutely nowhere near as many people as they need to make a meaningful impact on legislation right now. And I think that the idea behind Force the Vote was incredibly vitriolic. I think the idea was literally like, I thought Jimmy Dore was literally saying at one point, we know we're not going to pass anything, but we want to get these fuckers on record for who's going to support Medicare for all or not. We want to see who's actually going to be, and it's like, why would you do that? You're giving them less room to negotiate in future elections, right? Maybe somebody's genuinely undecided on Medicare for all, and in a future election, they could go one way or another, but now you've forced their hand and you've locked them into a position that might be politically detrimental to them and the party in the future. And two, why would you try to preemptively force a vote on legislation that you know is not going to pass and expect that wouldn't impact its ability to pass in the future? Let's say that you do a force the vote right now, and let's say Medicare for all gets shot down 98% in the House. What do you think that's going to look like 4 years from now, when maybe you've got an even more blue House potentially, and now you want to bring that legislation up again, and people are looking back at you and you're like, well, the last time you tried to do it, you guys got shot down 10-1. Why the fuck would we even waste time on the floor listening to this legislation, right? And you've hampered the ability of AOC and other very blue Dems getting on any type of committees and being able to work with other politicians, because now every other congressman is looking at them being like, I'm not going to work with you. You're going to fucking backstab me. Like, I'm not going to be working with somebody in Congress that's going to put me on a fucking list because I'm not going to vote for legislation that has absolutely no chance in hell of passing and is only going to hurt me in a more vulnerable district, right? That's another thing that people don't consider too. And I love the Justice Dems to death. I respect what they do. But you motherfuckers are in plus 40 blue D districts, okay? There's nothing brave about AOC coming out and supporting Medicare for all. There's a lot more bravery involved in people in these very at-risk, these very vulnerable states, whether trying to force them to take hard positions on very challenging legislation that is incredibly divisive is the most politically self-destructive and detrimental thing I could possibly think of doing for the party. So that I didn't like, force the vote felt to me. Sorry, I'm being really mean. I'm not trying to be mean. Force the vote felt to me like...
I love the discussion.
It was just like a very childlike understanding of like how Congress works. And it's like, well, maybe we can just get them on record as voting or not voting. It's like, damn, there's like 4 huge negative things that can come out of this. Hurting a politician's ability to do future elections, hurting the Justice Dems' associations with people inside Congress, hurting the ability to pass Medicare for all in the future because you already have a negative vote, and then potentially... like forcing divides in the party that don't even need to be there, right? There's at least like 4, and you could probably name more. There's 4 huge like negative outcomes to this, and there's not a single positive. Like, what's the positive? You already admitted that it's never passing, right? Like, what's the positive? They were saying, well, maybe we can primary some of these. You can't primary anybody out, okay? There's a reason why the Justice Dems support 10% of the people they used to. It's because they know that the progressive agenda is nowhere near as popular as it used to be. It's why they lose in every purple district. It's why people have talked about primarying Manchin with a progressive candidate, and they lose 50-1. It's why, you just don't have the power for it. Win elections. And nobody wants to hear this, but if you want to increase your particular representation in the government, go win elections. It's one of the big problems I have with the Libertarian Party. If you guys want more representation, stop obsessing over the presidency every 4 years and try to win local elections, and then try to win like even your federal elections. There's more than just passing one huge bill or just having like federal legislators. Okay, sorry.
I was gonna say I could not have said it better myself, because I think that is one of the things that you truly do see in very small local elections, that is the biggest place where you're going to see the biggest amount of change. For example, with all of the COVID stuff that was going on, right? a lot of people were saying, oh, like, we need to, vote for this congressman and vote for that congressman. It's like, well, it comes down to your city leaders, though, whether they're going to keep like a mask mandate in place or not. I mean, that's where you're going to see the biggest amount of change. So I totally agree with you on that 100%. But then it does come, though, that age-old question of, nobody likes the establishment. And this is where I
love
say,
the establishment. That's the one thing that I am a huge establishment shill. I'll fight with you all day over it too. Unironic, I'm not joking.
Oh my God!
I am
let's go, Destiny.
massive supporter of so earlier when I said it was kind of confusing talking about left and right, I think what politics has really become today is populist versus anti-populist, or more specifically, anti-establishment versus establishment type. And I think that's what your big divides in politics are. So like Trump and Bernie Sanders, people 100%,
are like, 100%, yes.
Yeah, why do Trump and Bernie Sanders fans seem to have like overlap, at least in the online world? Well, it's because they're both populists. They're both anti-establishment. This is why the far left and the far right kind of get along in some ways. And even parts of the center left and center right do, yeah. But I think that's like the big dividing line in U.S. politics, and even like in international politics today. It's kind of this establishment, anti-establishment narrative, yeah.
So then why the okay, if you had to pick like 3 things that you like about the establishment and what they keep pushing or they keep in place, what would you say that they are? And we can go from there.
Well, the overall reason why is because establishments are necessary for the functioning of society. That absent your establishments, your animals roaming the forest, killing each other, right? That we need to have in society these third-party bodies that we entrust to keep society functioning. And when I say trust, I mean, we don't have all the information there because we don't have time to read and learn every single thing, right? I don't know how to okay an internal combustion engine. I don't know, right? So
exactly.
So they're necessary that you have these third-party bodies you've entrusted with some power to keep society running, because absent them, you're hunter-gatherers, I guess. Yeah.
So obviously I would say that, and I still debate this even in my own head about the FBI, because there are times where I think the FBI is awesome, and then there's times where I think the FBI is compromised. You obviously being more of pro-establishment would be pro-FBI, I'm assuming, if we're going to talk about like...
Yeah, of course, pro-law enforcement in general. The establishments of them, yeah. Now, that doesn't mean they don't ever make mistakes, and it doesn't mean that they're beyond reproach or criticism. Of course, they can be criticized, yeah. But
Okay, so then if we're pro-establishment, because I will say I am pro, let's have, a police department.
Just curious, real quick, you said you were a reporter before. Are you a lawyer, or do you do reporting?
I am not a lawyer, no. Okay, I just have a lot of friends that are, and a lot of family that are, and let me tell you.
Okay, cool.
I like logical arguing, but I think it's one of those things where I love political debate.
Sure.
I've always loved political debate because I think it's just so interesting, especially being, a reporter, news anchor, and, I've what's the word? Moderated debates for mayors, for, senators, all that, like the Beto O'Rourke debate when he had one. I mean, I just love watching the discourse, or, what a lot of these folks say. And the problem that I always had was, it was like, okay, these guys are always talking about what they're going to do, or what the other side, or I'm sorry, not what they're going to do. It's what the other side has done wrong. And you don't hear enough solutions out there.
Sure.
And that, I think, is one of the biggest problems that I think that America is truly yearning for. Is it's like, for example, like with what's going on with the economy, whether you think it's great or it's bad, it's like, well, wherever we're at, how are we going to fix it for those that think it is bad, and how, what are we going to do about it? But so when it comes to police, though, like the one thing that I will say that I'm having a big problem with is during the Black Lives Matter movement and all that other stuff, the big cry was defund the police. I was in a lot of those, when St. John's Square was burning outside of the White House, I was there with my camera guy in hand covering all of it. So it's like, I remember those very vividly. And the big call was defund the police.
Sure.
Now you're seeing your establishments like your Nancy Pelosi's, your Chuck Schumer's, the ones that you might be a little bit more attuned to, saying, well, no, now we do have to, fund the police, or there does need to be a police department. So what do you think of their message?
The defund police thing was just driven by so much stupidity and nonsense. And I think people realized that congressmen started to complain about it during the presidential election, that a lot of people were losing races over like a lot of the dumb rhetoric over defund the police. I was always opposed to defund the police. I thought it was always stupid. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. It's just it's just on its face. It's just dumb. Yeah, it's just stupid.
No, yeah. When you're talking about the establishment, though, one of the things too that I find interesting, at least with establishment Dems or even Republicans too, or in particular if you're going to go the establishment route, because then it's like if you go to establishment, there are the Democrat and Republican establishments. The Republican establishment has seemed to really jump on this whole critical race theory, teaching, gender to your kids. And they're going, because around elections, they got to find something to get you out to the polls, right? And so they're really going for your kids.
Yeah.
The Democrats, I feel like, right now they have the Roe v. Wade thing, but that might not be as, popular as my kids right now that are alive. But I feel like, too, it's hard for them to find a message, like Trump, it was Make America Great Again. People loved it. I mean, we call it the MAGA movement for a reason, because it was all about a movement of people, whereas Hillary Clinton's was I'm with her.
Sure.
I feel like the Democrats are really shitty when it comes to their messaging. What say you?
I mean, messaging is a problem, but I think politicians are having a legitimately difficult time figuring out where the American public is on a lot of things. I mean, I would actually argue depends on my shitty on messaging. I guess Republicans are good at messaging, but I really don't feel like they stand for anything right now. When I think
hell no.
Yeah,
no.
They have what is the Republican economic plan right now? I have no fucking idea.
Exactly.
Because all I hear
they
them
don't
talk
have a
about
solution.
Yeah, I feel like if I'm trying to figure out what is Ted Cruz going to be talking about today, I feel like I need to open up the Libs of TikTok Twitter account. That's how stupid I feel like a lot of the Republican rhetoric has gotten, or maybe see what Trump has tweeted today for marching orders. Democrats have always sucked at messaging. I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know.
Is it that they're trying to appeal to so many people, whereas Republicans have the Roger Ailes mindset of I don't need to appeal to everybody. I'm just going to appeal to this specific group of people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I guess it's a lot harder when you talk about even what I said earlier. It's really hard to give a good defense of why establishments are important. Or it's not hard, but it's a conversation that you have to have. Whereas on the Republican side, it's basically just Trump is my emperor, and I'm going to do literally whatever the fuck he says, and I'll walk off the edge of the earth for him if he commands me so. Unironically, that's where a lot of the Republican Party is right now. And that's a super easy and cool message to get behind. I'm saying it obviously derisively, but I've got this brave, strong leader. He shits on all the Democrats. He makes me laugh. He's a cool dude. He does this. It's really easy to get behind a person rather than a kind of complicated, detached set of establishments are important because for a well-functioning society, it just feels lame to even go down that road.
But I will give you this, though. There was one message that they did get behind in 2020 that I will say it was the one message that worked. And I feel like they still kind of try to do it. And it was, no matter what, we're anti-Trump.
Sure.
So they used
the
Trump message too.
Yeah, in a way that they kind of played the Republicans card against it, because really all the Republicans had, because Trump had no policies for whatever Republicans want to say. He really didn't. He didn't do anything legislatively. He really didn't have any policies. His opinions on things would change constantly. But he was a cool guy to get behind. But then that made it really easy for the Democrats to be okay, well, if their whole political message is basically we're going to do whatever Trump says, our whole political message is we're going to, fuck Trump. We oppose everything he says. And I was okay, well, I guess. And then that's basically the message played on both sides. It was really funny because one of the reasons for election fraud that a lot of the Republicans bring up is that there's no way that Biden could get that many people out to the polls. There's no way. And they're half correct. There is no way that Biden could get that many people out to the polls. You are absolutely right. People didn't go out to the polls for Biden, though. They went out to the polls to vote against Trump. And Trump absolutely can drive that many people to the polls on both sides. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that was the one thing where I think it's hard to tell my Republican friends this because, again, like I say, I think both sides do stupid things all the time. I mean, and we're not going to like everything that they do. Again, like I say, I'm a buffet. But the one thing that I tell my Republican friends is I'm you have to remember something, okay? He lost the election. He was bitter. He told people that the race was going to be rigged in Georgia. So don't even bother to go out in Georgia. When the races actually, at the time for Senate, were neck and neck. And so people didn't go. And it's do you guys realize, What? You listened?
The ultimate irony of some of the Trump stuff of trying to rig the election in the future, not, I shouldn't say rig, that's a really harsh word, but in trying to say the election was like going to be rigged, was that in a way, it is possible that Trump lost the election himself. Like, I wonder, because some of these races were so tight, I wonder how many Republicans just didn't bother to do mail-in voting because they thought it was going to be rigged, and then they ended up missing the poll date. Like, were there enough Republicans in some states that if Trump wasn't constantly shitting on mail-in voting, that they would have mail-in voted, and maybe that would have been enough to swing a few states towards Trump? It's a thing to think about.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is for example, like a lot of Republicans don't realize too, and the numbers are there. And I piss a lot of my Republican friends off too when I say this, but when they talk about voter ID and all that, the biggest voters that they hurt, it's not the illegals that vote, it's their own. It's the older senior citizens who have the expired driver's license and they can't go and get their driver's license renewed, and then they don't go and get their state ID instead. I mean, there's a lot of it's just so interesting because a lot of that voter ID stuff or the mail-in voting, I don't want to call it conspiracy, but the controversy of it hurt a lot of their own voters when they decided, I'm not going to do that, or if we do, voting with an ID, not realizing that it's going to be some of their own voters. It's not all blue voters.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about, like for example, Trump and Biden, let's just go there, right? One of the arguments that Republicans or Trump supporters do have, which I sometimes do agree with, especially when it comes to foreign policy, is we didn't have a lot of problems that we see now under Trump. In particular, a war that started over with Russia and Ukraine. You saw, little Rocket Man. He was a little bit more under control. Now he's firing off his little North Korean dicks into space, as I call, to show how powerful he is. What is your view on the Democrats right now with foreign policy? Because right now, I think they're kind of screwing the pooch on this one.
I am actually shocked that Biden's foreign policy has been as unbelievably successful as it has been. I love Biden's foreign policy. I love this. Okay. Wow. Hold on. I'm getting chills thinking about how. First of all, first thing.
Can we agree though? Like, I think we do agree on a lot of stuff, but I feel like this is how debates should be.
Sure.
Not like, hey, because even I saw the Anna Kasparian debate with PragerU, and I like both. I think she's very intelligent, but I was just like, that's not a debate. You had all these clips of him and he was just supposed to answer to it. And I was kind of like, I don't think that was kosher, but I mean, that's just me. But either way, I love this though. I do love this because I think it's what more people should do, and they should watch this everywhere and share it everywhere to show, what discourse can look like in a friendly way. And we both can learn something,
Okay.
But yeah. Okay, bitch, keep going.
A few things. Yeah, I'm sorry. Foreign policy is a big one for me. Number one.
Me too. This is
Trump
my bread and
made
butter,
a lot of huge foreign policy blunders, okay, that nobody seems to talk about. One, abandoning the Kurds in Syria was really shitty, in my opinion. Nobody talks about it. Nobody cares about it. That's one. Two, moving the Israeli embassy east from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I think like 2 countries in the world supported that. Unnecessarily aggressive. I don't think we needed to insert ourselves that much into the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Very unpopular move internationally. 2. 3, the revocation of that Iranian nuclear agreement that was keeping them off of pursuing nuclear arms that they are now getting ever closer to was abysmal. I don't know why he pulled us out of that agreement. Absolutely horrible foreign policy idea. Number 4, the general undermining of our relationships around the world. You had Angela Merkel saying that Europe can't look to U.S. leadership anymore. All of the fights that we get into with every leader around the world, with Trump just can't stop running his mouth. Let's see, what else was there? Jesus. He technically, Trump is the one that committed us in the, I believe it was the Doha agreements, were the ones where he is the one that technically committed us to that Afghanistan pullout date that Biden followed through on.
Right.
The meetings, sending people from our State Department to have meetings with people like in North Korea without securing a single concession, where you've got even Pence, I think, talking shit behind Trump's back because North Korea is continuing all of their missile testing and continuing everything they were doing before. But somehow Trump is saying we've made successful heads in negotiating with them, which is unbelievable. Jeez, yeah. I didn't think Trump's foreign policy was good at all, other than like, well, we didn't start any new wars, which I guess is true, but we didn't end any. He still bombed Syria. He bombed that Syrian airport in response to another
chemical.
chemical.
Which I was very much against, yes.
Sure, yeah.
I am very anti-war, very anti-war. So when it comes to, going into Iraq over weapons of mass destruction, and then you have whistleblower Scott Ritter saying, nope, there's none. And basically, Madeleine Albright trying to shut him up. I hope she's burning in hell because, the 100,000 Iraqi kids were worth it. When it comes to now, the one thing I will say is I did agree with him on the pullout of Afghanistan, because I think that was a forever war. And people were making money off of it. And, for example, it was those neocons. That's why when you first said neocon, there are some people that don't like that word. They're
Sure.
like, no, that's not what they are. No, that's what they are. They make a lot of money off of war. Dick Cheney retired from Halliburton with $26 million and then went on to go be the vice president. Okay, like, he was making money,
Sure. Although it seems like a lot of people that say that, like, I don't want forever wars, and I'm glad that Trump made these deals, we got really mad when Biden actually pulled us out of Afghanistan.
I was not.
Okay, that's good.
I was not. But the problem was, though, is that I feel like we were hoodwinked. And it's so interesting because I was very much against. I was like, good, finally we are out of Afghanistan. And I keep saying, like, no matter when we pulled out of Afghanistan, we have screwed that country up so much. No matter when we pulled out, it was going to be a vacuum. The Taliban were going to go in. However, it's tough with the Taliban. I talked to they call it the director of communications of the Taliban, spoke and did an interview with him and asked him specifically about women staying and being able to go to college and being able to go to school. And he talked to me till he was blue in the face saying, yep, they're going to keep going to school. We're not going to do anything. Sure as shit, Stephen, a week later, they're not going to school anymore.
Yeah, of course.
So it's like, how do you don't want to negotiate with terrorists, but how are you going to negotiate with terrorists? And we're holding that, was it $9 billion that we have? It is between a rock and a hard place. Do you give it back? Because the country, you have Afghanistan families that are literally selling their children so that they can, relieve their debts. But then you also had it where we were U.S. soldiers over there. We had U.S. soldiers over there that were working with the Afghan army where they were raping little boys, and we really didn't do anything.
It's tough, but like you have to make a call in terms of like what kind of foreign policy you're gonna have. And unfortunately, it's probably not our job, at least unilaterally, to go in and dictate like styles of government. If we think they're human rights 100%. Abuses, then we kind of have to follow through with, the UN, like, file things for that, see if there are human rights abuses there, and then do sanctions, tariffs, and if necessary, some sort of like combined military intervention. But the US probably shouldn't be going at it alone for these types of issues. Yeah.
And with Afghanistan, they didn't. We had the UK, we had Australia, we had the Dutch, we had France. We had a lot of countries that were there with us that were all making bank too. But yeah, so I was very much for the pullout of Afghanistan, which I know is a very unpopular opinion. But as far as now, like, what's kind of happening with like the war in Ukraine and stuff like that.
Another situation that Biden has handled flawlessly. We can talk about that as much as you want too.
Oh, okay. You first.
Just
first.
The United States aggressively and preemptively leaking intel across the world, letting everybody know that Russia was planning on invading, I think bolstered a lot of confidence in the Five Eyes, the NATO, the U.S. security apparatus. It showed that we had a really good handle of understanding on the ground the situation, what was going on. We made all of those predictions incredibly transparently, incredibly clearly, incredibly in the open. The intro to the war was really good. I think that Biden setting a hard line, saying that we're going to support the fuck out of Ukraine, but we're not putting U.S. troops on the ground, we're not flying, we're not doing no-fly zones, we're not doing anything that could provoke or instigate like an actual armed conflict where U.S. soldiers are crossing swords with Russian soldiers. I thought that was really good. Biden's ability, I don't even know how he does this, because at this point, I kind of buy into he's probably a little bit senile, maybe, but like that guy's ability to get all of these different countries that were part of the NATO apparatus together to start negotiating on things that historically they were really uncomfortable, whether it's France being NATO skeptic, whether it's Germany being skeptic of like supporting Eastern countries, things like all of these things came together, and we have this huge apparatus that is now supporting Ukraine in a way that's hopefully avoiding direct U.S. involvement in the scenario, and Ukraine is actually managing to win that conflict. I don't know if there is. I'm curious if you want to offer something. I don't know if there's a single thing that Biden or the United States could have done better in terms of handling that conflict and the trajectory from start to finish, or to soon to be finished. Well, not soon, but the start to where we're at now for that entire conflict.
So when you say, is there something that Biden could have done better or handled it better? I have a lot.
Go for it.
But mine does not talk about right now. Mine actually goes back to when he was vice president.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the Maidan coup in 2014?
Like the Euromaidan?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
In Ukraine?
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems that I have as far as being very anti-war is since 1960, the United States has either funded, backed, kind of circumvented, been involved in more than 62 coups around the world and overthrowing governments that have people that we don't like. And many times the people like them, it's just that we don't. And many times they see, the United States sees something that they have, and it's like, well, we kind of want that. And we don't really like Nicolas Maduro, so let's kind of throw him out and bring in Juan Guaido. And the people are like, wait, hang on a second, when you're talking just Venezuela. When it comes to Ukraine,
that was under Trump, by the way, just as a heads up.
Which I was very much against.
Yep. I think Trump
did not like that.
He brought Guaido to the
and I wanted to puke.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I think we were also trying to ship medical supplies and food over to him as well in Venezuela. But yeah, go ahead.
Right. Which we made that whole debacle even worse. So again, like I hate them all. Okay. But when it comes to Ukraine, first things first, NATO, obviously we know the original design and the intent of NATO was to keep the Soviet Union at bay after World War II. It was signed into NATO that they were never going to expand outside of the 7 countries that started in NATO. And NATO has added a country. Russia would say NATO has broken its promise more than 14 different times. So you have that, first of all. You have then, the Warsaw Pact that happened, which obviously kind of didn't matter anymore. But you have the United States literally giving all of its money to NATO. I'm sorry, I don't mean that. Scratch that. We are funding NATO. All these other countries, and that was the one thing that I did agree with Trump on was, why isn't everybody else paying their fair share? Why are we the ones that are having to foot the bill? Obviously, I think it's the military-industrial complex. The United States loves a good war, and we make a lot of money from it. And I think Trump was the first one to bring that into question. But then you have Ukraine. After the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, you can go back and talk about all of the boundaries that were made, and it was all because of, what is it, Khrushchev, or I can't remember what the guy's name is. Yes, thank you. I was going to say Khrushchev. And you can go back into all of that. It's like, okay, let's go beyond that. But that part of Ukraine is very, national, or Russian nationals, or native Russians, Russian speaking. So you were always going to kind of have that internal civil war going on just in general. And I think with the United States going in there in the early 2010s and finagling it, and again, Biden being, involved in being the point person on Ukraine, and then having his son be involved with Burisma, one, I don't think was a good look. Two, when you have guys like John McCain, closet neocon, Lindsey Graham, closet neocon, Chuck Schumer, even Nancy Pelosi going over to Ukraine and handing out cookies to all of the soldiers that are, literally burning down government buildings, kind of a full-blown insurrection. And we are the ones seen as supplying it and funding it, I don't think is a good idea. I don't think we should have ever gotten involved. Now you have the Ukraine having to side, pick, do we want to side more with Russia or the West being Europe and the United States. I think when you have the idea, okay, let's back up again. Putin had 3 things that he said he was adamant about. Okay. He said that he didn't want the United States supplying Ukraine with any military might. He wanted Ukraine to remain neutral, and he wanted Ukraine to never, ever, ever be in NATO. That was his red line, if you will. And I think when you have, kind of what started a lot of this was Ukraine flirting with the idea of being part of NATO. Russia started its troop buildup, which I think was originally intended to show aggression, to say, hey, don't even think about doing this. And then, again, I am against the invasion of Ukraine. We are in 2022. What in the hell are we doing invading countries? Invading countries. However, I do understand where Putin, being the madman that people think he is, when you poke the bear enough, he's going to react. And I think that we just poked the bear one too many times with Zelensky. And especially him now doing the whole, I'm going to sign myself into NATO and we're going to apply. It's like, are you crazy? If you have a crazy, dictator, crazy person in Russia saying my one rule is not NATO, and you're up here like puffing your chest out at a whole 5-7, oh, look, we're going to join NATO. It's like, are you crazy? So that's kind of my whole deal, is I think that it starts back in 2014. We meddled in it. Putin didn't like it. You go back to 2009 with Hillary Clinton and the reset button. That was never reset. We all know that. We're not stupid. But I just think that we've meddled too much there. And I think a lot of it was because we knew we could kind of either funnel money through there or work with Ukrainian oligarchs or what have you. And I just think that it's a mess of a situation. My heart breaks for the people over there. But I mean, I think we're kind of responsible a little bit. Wouldn't you say? I know I gave you like a loaded thing there. So
nope, you're good. Okay. I'm going to start talking. And what I want you to do is every single time I say something you disagree with me, stop me. Okay? Okay. So here's the first thing that I will say. I highly encourage anybody to do this. I think that there is a big difference between U.S. foreign policy from 1940 to 1991 versus 1991 to today. So I'm very hesitant to compare. When you talk about the U.S. supporting coups in the 60s, 70s, especially in places like South America, I agree that, and in Eurasia, I agree that there are criticisms to be levied at the United States there, for sure. However, it was a very, very, very different world. You can look at conflicts that we quote unquote meddle in, but there's also meddling happen on the other side as well, right?
100%. Russia and Cuba is one of them.
Yes, absolutely. The Soviet Union and Cuba, right? If you look at like the civil war that happens in Afghanistan, people always point out like, oh, well, that, it's all bad because the U.S. moved in and they supported the Mujahideen and that's blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, the Soviet Union were supporting people on the other end that were losing power in that state as well. Like there were oftentimes two sides to all these conflicts. Not to say that the U.S. was right to meddle or that the Soviet Union was wrong or right to meddle. I'm just saying that all of these conflicts were incredibly complicated. Even the Vietnam.
Right, and I guess my point too is just by saying that is the point is that we have that much power
for sure.
We can do that.
Absolutely.
So that's my point.
I want to draw a difference between 60s, 70s, 80s foreign policy around the world during the Cold War was very crazy. There's a lot of crazy shit going on. But I think that the United States foreign policy post 91 was markedly different. We were a lot more chilled out. That's why our supporting of Guaido was literally like bringing him to the United States and putting him in front of Trump during was it the State of the Union or was some speech?
Yeah, State of the Union.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, is that shitty? Sure. But in the 60s, it would have been like, we sent like 400 guerrilla fighters down there with our most trained like fucking CIA operator, right? It would have been way different if this was 1964 instead of 2018 or whatever, right?
Zero fucks given.
Yeah. It would have been way different. So, so I think that's a good point to look at the difference, okay? So the original intention of NATO was originally to stand in opposition to mounting pressure from the Soviet Union. I agree with that. And then the Soviet Union collapses in 90 and 91, and then the Warsaw Pact falls apart, and it's like, okay. And I do agree that to some extent, people were kind of looking at like, well, what is the purpose of NATO? and what's going to happen to Europe. And there are some foreign policy experts from the School of Realism, you know, people like Mearsheimer, I think, are quoted a lot.
Yes, Robert, Mearsheimer, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Total fucking idiot, by the way. Hate this guy. But anyway, so people like him are writing all these papers in the 90s, and they're saying, it's over. Europe is destroyed. You cannot have a unipolar world. It's all going to...
His latest lecture, though, sorry, that's where I'm going to stop you.
Go ahead.
His latest lecture in 2015 spoke about why Ukraine is the United States' problem, not Russia's problem. So I do agree. Some of his writings in the 90s, it was like, okay, you're kind of like going a little crazy here.
Yeah, because everybody was basically saying that, like, without the Soviet Union and with just the United States, Europe is going to descend into chaos. It's going to be over. Everything is completely fucked. And it did not happen. The next 30 years were the most peaceful years in all of Europe. And I think part of what we can contribute that to is having that little NATO button. It's like the blue check mark of Twitter for like foreign policy. When you're part of NATO, people don't fuck with you, because if you fuck with somebody in NATO, the United States is going to show up and destroy your world. And you've seen like these NATO campaigns where like NATO doesn't have problems when it comes time to fucking somebody up. You know, Russia said they were going to invade fucking Ukraine, and it's this years long multi fucking and everything is fucked. The United States says we're going to get rid of Saddam Hussein, and in 28 days we're in and out of that country. Shit is fucked, right? So NATO represents a real like military like imposing threat across all of Europe that in a way I think kind of keeps people like pretty chilled out. And it seemed like for the most part, the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, that actually worked pretty well. And then also I will direct ourselves over in the 2000s, from 2004 to, I think it was 2004 to 2008. If we look at places where NATO's not involved, like say the country of Georgia, you can kind of see Russia doing some weird shit there. You see Russia moving down. You see Russia moving into, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. I don't remember the names. These two breakaway states. They move down, they fuck with them, they peel off territories, blah, 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 blah. You see that happening over there. And then you look back to Europe and you're like, oh, well, you know, how are the Baltics doing? You know, how you guys feel into NATO? They're sitting pretty good. They feel pretty safe. We're sharing a border with Russia. There's no conflict there. There's no weird nuke shit going on or whatever. Everybody's
because they were dealing with Russia. They were dealing with Kosovo at the time.
Sure.
So everybody else was like, yeah, we're good. We're good.
Sure. I'm just saying that in general, the state of peace throughout all of Europe was pretty good. And and NATO was not this huge threat. Putin even floated the idea. Now he was mad because he didn't get an expedited invite, but even floated the idea of joining NATO. And in 2001 and onwards, the United States' relationship with Russia actually grew pretty significantly as part of the war on terror. We started to share intel with each other a lot more. We grew a little bit. We fell apart a little bit. But anyway, that's like the general trend of 90s, 2000s, 2010s. The reason why I like to point this out is because people always say, coming forward to 2014, well, the reason why Russia invaded Ukraine is because of threats from NATO and the United States. That's not true. The whole Baltics share a border with Russia. They were part of NATO. There was no problem there. Turkey has nuclear weapons, okay? Pretty sure they can shoot at Moscow if they want with some of these, and there's no problems there. The issue
But Turkey has a very good relationship with Russia, though, as well as India. And
I thought Turkey and Russia's relationship were pretty strained. I remember Russia trying to fly planes south to bomb stuff in Syria, and Turkey shot down two Russian planes in Turkish airspace. I don't think Turkey and Russia are very cool with each other at all, unless I could be missing something.
Are you talking about when was the Turkish-Russian part?
They might be close now, but that was during the Syrian conflict. I remember there was a big deal.
I'm sorry. I was talking about now. My apologies. I was talking about now, their relationship.
Yeah, maybe they might be now. I thought that wasn't the purchasing of TB2 drones from Turkey part of the big reason why in 2013, 2014, although this is going earlier, was part of the reason why Ukraine was like pushing a lot on that civil war to the southeast too. But But even if you say that NATO and Turkey are close now, well, Turkey is also a NATO country, so see, we're all getting along. We can get along. Right. It's possible, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I don't like the idea of saying that it's NATO's fault, because NATO's been expanding and pushing for a long time, and Russia's been pretty chill. Like we're doing our thing. The reason why Russia is so mad is because they had I'm not going to call him a puppet president, but they had a leader, Yanukovych in Ukraine, who was ready to toss aside the will of the parliament of the Verkhrayat, whatever the fuck it's called, and he was going to sign into a customs union with Russia instead of the free trade agreement that they had on the table with the European Union.
But do you know why he decided to do that?
Are you going to tell me it's because of a threat on tariffs for oil and gas, or what was it?
No, No, well, one of the reasons was he felt there was somewhat of a payback because when the Soviet Union fell, Ukraine was in massive, massive debt, and Russia paid it. And there is kind of one of the biggest things with Yanukovych is he felt this like, you know, because you always hear like Russians and Ukrainians, they'll be like, oh, it's like big brother, little brother. Although Ukrainians,
I don't know if that's true.
They will
but...
not call it that anymore. But like Russians will say, oh, that's like our little brother, you know.
Russians will say that, but Ukrainians,
right,
Ukrainians will
not. Yes.
Because something that you brought up, just real quick on that, because a lot of people point out Crimea and Eastern Ukraine, you know, there's a lot of ethnically Russian people, a lot of Russian speaking people there. That's part of what the Soviet Union did to the territories that they took over. Especially if you've heard of something, I don't know if you've ever heard of like the Holodomor, massive famines that spread across a lot of the Soviet Union, millions of people from Ukraine, and it's never talked about, but a lot of people from Kazakhstan as well were I won't say killed, but they were starved to death, and if they tried to run, they were shot and killed. Yeah. Right? Yeah.
There's actually a memorial to those people in Washington, D.C.
Sure.
Just outside Union Station.
Yeah, so when people say like, oh, well, there's a lot of ethnically Russian people there, it's like, well, yeah, that's because they killed a whole bunch of fucking Ukrainians that used to live there. Of course, there's a lot of Russians there now. But yeah, just on that, yeah. But
very true.
Yeah, but so broadly speaking, I know there's a lot of Russian people in Eastern Ukraine because there are a lot of people that are killing Ukraine there. But in 1991, the Warsaw Pact dissolved, the Soviet Union dissolved. Ukraine had borders where they were like, these are our borders. Does everybody respect these borders? And the new country of Russia and the United States and the rest of the world were all like, we recognize your borders. That's cool. And because Russia lost their leader in 2014, that got ousted during the Euromaidan, they decided, well, fuck you. We're going to come in and fuck your shit up. They instigated heavily armed conflict in Donetsk and Luhansk and the Donbass. And then they moved in and they invaded and they stole Crimea, which are pretty fucked up things to do if a sovereign state is to steal their territory. And then that's, go.
With Yanukovych getting ousted, I mean, who helped fund that coup? That's when you had McCain and everybody, Slava Ukraini, we stand with you. Now is your time to stand up for democracy. You can overthrow these people. That to me is us getting involved when it's like, that's kind of an internal problem, you know? Sure.
So we definitely showed support overseas, but we absolutely did not fund it. There was no funding. There was no foreign funding of any activities. Like, and I understand that we have like a weird view of the world because we're very modern or we're very recent. But if you go back to prior to 2014, people will say this, like, all the riots and all the protests and all that, those were external coups. People were funding them, blah, blah, blah. No, prior to 2014, Ukraine was literally voted like the most corrupt country in the entire world. There were a lot of people protesting.
Still is.
Yeah, there were, well, I don't know if it still is. There were a lot of oligarchs there. There was a lot of crazy money there. The government was fucking insane. Putin was trying to fucking cyanide poison leaders and shit. There was a lot of insane shit happening in Ukraine that gave them plenty of valid reasons to protest. You don't need external funding there. Now, I know people will point to like, well, there was
But a lot of people say that those oligarchs, though, were propped up by Western money, that they were making deals with not even just the United States, also with the EU, that there was a lot of, because there was talk that the EU was bribing those oligarchs to then bribe those politicians because they're the way that their oligarchs and their politics work there is much different here in the sense that they can even have more pull. Like, I mean, imagine Jeff Bezos having like pull in Congress. You know, it was one of these things where I can't remember who it was that wrote on this, but that they were just a lot more corrupt than our billionaires and stuff here.
Yeah, the corruption in Ukraine is insane for sure, but I don't think they were funded. I don't know where this, I know people make claims, but I like to see stuff like the funding of like European Union money into propping up the oligarchs. Like, I think the oligarchs are going to exist there regardless, just because of how corrupt and fucked Ukraine was as a state.
Right, but
like
there was that whole vote though where they could join the European Union, or like, you know, Yanukovych said, no, well, we're going to side with Russia. They originally were going to go all for the European Union. And
well, because that's what their parliament had voted on. But then Yanukovych was like, fuck you guys, we're going to do the Russian trade union, which would have essentially made the country like like another Belarus, basically.
Right. But his whole thing was, I guess Yanukovych says that, you know, they were being propped up by Western money, and he felt a duty to Russia because they bailed him out. And also they thought that they were not going to be corrupt. They weren't going to be as corrupt as the West. Because I will say this, there is very much the idea that the West is insanely corrupt. And I mean, I talk to my Russian friends and they're like, you guys are so corrupt with your money. You and your deals. And I'm like, well, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like,
this is
what? You're just more secret about
absolutely
it?
not true. So
Yeah.
Russians might say that because that's what they're fed every day by the government. But if you go and talk to anybody,
There is a free press though in Russia though. There is a lot
absolutely
of people act like
not. Russia today
I have
is.
I have a friend that writes for an opposition Russian news outlet, and
People like Navalny,
angry.
people are literally thrown into jail in Russia for being political opposition.
Well,
Russia
okay, so
today is
Navalny
state-run media.
And you know it's funny. You ready for this one? I'm about to blow your mind, buddy.
Okay.
I worked for RT America.
Doesn't blow my mind at all. Don't worry.
Which I will say this. RT America, definitely separate from Moscow. We have like the same call letters. But
Okay.
no, we are separate from Moscow in the sense I had my own primetime show there. I was never told what to say, never told what to talk about.
Sure.
My show, for real, I could talk about anything.
No, I believe you. I've done like some
a-
segments on like RT shows, right?
Right.
But that's
and-
part of the strategy, right? Is that like they can point to and say, oh no, we're credible. Look at what we have over here. Like, look, we let these people say what they want. We let these people do what they want.
I mean, doesn't American media do the same thing? Like
No.
Fox does that with Tucker.
American
Fox
media
does that with Tucker.
American media does not. We don't have state-run media in the United States, like RT is. Like Russia today.
You could say any PBS is state run, BBC is state run.
Absolutely, neither of those are
TRT
state
is
runs. No. Those are state funded, but they're not state run. Russia today, the media in Russia is not only state funded by the Russian government, but they get their marching orders from the Kremlin. They are what they report. They absolutely do. Russia today absolutely does.
No, that's a common. Maybe in Moscow, in the United States, no.
No. In the U.S., RT America might not. But
Right, okay.
Russia today in Russia absolutely does. It's state-run media. I don't think they would even deny this. I think it's just they say.
I mean, I have some friends that are there now that were at RT America here, and they are now in Moscow. And I've talked to one of them. One of them specifically, Rachel Blevins. And I said, "Is anything different over there?" And she's like, "No, it's the same." And I was like, "They don't tell you what to do?" And she's like, "No." Now, granted, she is very pro on the Russia side, so they might not tell her anything yet. But I'll tell you this: on my program, the day after Russia invaded, because I was very much, I don't think Russia's going to do it. They're not that stupid. I was very much, like where you say with NATO and stuff, like they're not going to fuck with that. There's no way Russia's going to do it. They'd be idiots to do it. And that's what I kept saying. And then the next day I said I was wrong. And I said, I don't care what anybody calls it, because there was a lot of people on the pro-Russian side that were like, no, this is a military operation. And I said, fuck that. It is an invasion. Are there tanks rolling in the middle of the street? Are there soldiers on the street? That is an invasion, not a military operation, because military operations don't last for 2 months sometimes.
Sure. So
and that's where, I got no riffraff from it.
Yeah, so
let me say it.
The way that Russian propaganda works, and it all vibes off of what you said earlier. The way that Russian propaganda works is people think that propaganda is about making it so that one side is credible and the other side is uncredible. That's like the goal of propaganda. That's not how Russian propaganda works. Russian propaganda is to just make it so that it seems like everybody lies a lot. So like, I'll trust my country.
Very true.
And what you said, what your friend said earlier, it sounded like you said your friend earlier, she didn't say, oh, well, Russia is totally honest and the West is corrupt. It sounded like she said, oh, well, the West is really corrupt too, right? We're all corrupt. And that's like always the goal with Russian propaganda. So when you say, well, no, I had a show and I was able to report on what I wanted to report on and everything, yeah, that's not surprising to me, because that would be part of lending them like an air of credibility. But like all of the Russian reporting on the Ukrainian war has been insane. The fact that they still call it a special military operation, the claims of like the biolabs creating superhuman Ukrainian soldiers, them crying about their flagship in the Black Sea having a technical fire and then them scuttling the ship on purpose when it got fucking shot by Ukrainian missiles from the coast. Yeah, it's just been like lie after lie after lie after lie after lie from the Russian government.
But let's also be fair though. Okay, you had the whole story about the Snake Island, and it turned out to be a bunch of bullshit, and that's one of those things where, and I can recognize, I totally understand Russian propaganda because I see it, trust me. And I think, but I do think that there also is let's be fair here. It happens in American media too. I mean, you had, what was it? Was it Donaldson? You had a gentleman on MSNBC. Well, one of them I know too was Ed Schultz from MSNBC, who ended up working for RT America on his own program because he was against the Iraq and Afghanistan war. And I think it was Phil Donaldson who also was very much against. He said flat out on air, "I am against this invasion. This is bullshit." And he was gone the next day. So there are times where the American media has done it even to us.
Sure, the American media gets things wrong, for sure. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that. It was a little bit different though.
I'm not saying like in facts. I'm saying like in pushing a narrative of like we need to be in Iraq because there's weapons of mass destruction, and there were guys saying no, we shouldn't, and then they were booted off. We've done it to our own too, But again, I think it's anywhere near what we've seen in Russia, especially in times of war? Hell no. But as the saying goes, the first casualty of war is truth. And
sure, yeah, and I'm sure that there are people.
Of different stories.
Yeah, for sure. I will say though, there's a bit of a different flavor when it's being pushed by the actual government versus like private companies they can get things wrong and they can eat their own or whatever. They're not beyond criticism, of course. But so refocusing though, like there was legitimate reasons for Euromaidan, for the protests in Ukraine. I understand why Yanukovych was kicked out. They held their elections, they did their thing, and then Russia decides to peel off Crimea and hardcore instigate in the southeast of the country, in the Donbass, which are two totally unacceptable actions to me. I don't know why there's this weird expectation. Even what you said earlier. So you said that Putin had three conditions. Didn't want the U.S. supplying Ukraine with military might. They wanted Ukraine to remain neutral. And Ukraine was never, ever, ever to be in NATO. Why would Russia ever have the right to demand that of another huge country?
The only reason why is because they have nuclear weapons.
But like, what is the precedent?
I thought it was kind of absurd. Like, okay, who are you to dictate what NATO should do? But at the same time, it's like, okay, is that Putin just trying to express his, hey, well, you guys have your friends. These are my demands. Otherwise, I'm going to get pissy, know?
But like, we certainly can't like acquiesce to that, right? Like, him saying that like, well, I've got nukes, so I'm going to dictate what goes on like the foreign or the internal and foreign affairs of countries next to me. That can't
absolutely
possibly
not.
be.
But if he's a crazy person, we better be a little bit careful, right?
Being careful, sure. Which I think we have been. That's why we don't have troops in Ukraine. Yeah, but then why the demand for Ukraine to bend the knee? Don't they have a right to defend their country, to take Crimea back? To
absolutely.
Okay, absolutely. And then if we do believe that they have the right, some might even call it a moral right, but if we do believe that they have the right to do that, shouldn't we be helping them?
Yes. However, the only problem that I have is you're talking, if you're going to talk in Kamala Harris terms, Russia, the very big country, Ukraine, the smaller country, Ukraine, it doesn't have the same. Now, granted, the Russian military ain't that great either, but I feel like Ukraine is fighting a really, really difficult uphill battle that I think in the end, I don't know if Ukraine's going to win it. I'm not very confident in that just because Russia has that overarching, we have the nukes and you don't. And Ukraine gave up its nukes with promises of NATO from us. And now they're probably like,
wait. Why did Ukraine give up its nukes? It's kind of important.
Wasn't it for promises of NATO?
Ukraine gave up its nukes as part of the it wasn't the Doha, it was the was it the Budapest
Budapest Memorandum?
Yes.
Maybe?
The Budapest Memorandum was a promise.
And mind you, can we just be real for a second?
Yeah.
All of these memorandums, Warsaw Pacts, they have all these pacts, and all of them, I will say this, all of them have reneged on all of them.
Wait, hold on.
Why do we even do these?
This is a really important one, though, okay?
Russia.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is a really important one. Ukraine had one of the largest stockpiles of nuclear weapons in the world. I think it might have been the third largest. It might have been the second largest, actually. They might have had more nuclear arms there than Russia, because I think they got all of them after the Soviet Union. But they had the second or third largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the world. And they said, okay, listen up, guys. Because we want the world to be a less nuclear, more peaceful place, we're going to give up all of our nukes. You can go in and take all of them from us. That's fine. But you guys better not fucking invade us. And everybody's like, okay, that's cool. Less nukes on more countries is probably better. And the Russia was a signator to that agreement. And what the fuck? And they invaded them.
But there also was a backdoor promise, though, that they would eventually get into NATO.
There might have been some discussions, but that wasn't part of that those memorandums.
It wasn't in the memorandum.
Yeah.
But like, it was seen as, because the media reports at the time say like it was seen as, could this be, Ukraine's, I don't want to say bend the knee, but like, Ukraine's move towards NATO membership by agreeing with what the West wants it to do, or what the West is like pushing for.
Well, no, that's what everybody wanted. Everybody wants less nuclear weapons around the world. It generally makes everything.
Right,
but
yeah.
like, let's say that what you're saying is true. Hasn't Russia kind of proved that, like, holy fuck, Ukraine was right? Like, they really do need to be in NATO, because if they're not, damn, they just gave up all their nuclear weapons. And now that they don't have any nuclear weapons, Russia has decided to invade them and start stealing territory, which is shit you don't do in current year.
Right.
So isn't Russia kind of made the argument where it's like, yeah, well, fuck, maybe NATO expansion is really important. And now you've seen countries like Finland and Sweden who are like, yeah, fuck it, we're going to join NATO, which is the exact opposite of what I would imagine Russia would have wanted, was to empower even more people to join NATO, because it's like, well, does NATO need to exist? Well, it seems like it kind of does now, yeah.
Well, I think the problem was, though, is that I think also in the Budapest Agreement, it was where they were going to give up nukes, but NATO wasn't going to expand anymore.
No, that wasn't part of that. There is a...
Are you sure? There was one
100%
where it was
positive.
NATO wasn't going to expand anymore. There was one of them.
There is a quote that was given by Secretary of State James Baker to, I believe it was to Gorbachev, and it had to do with Germany. This gets quoted all the time. That Mearsheimer loser quotes it too, okay? There's a quote, and the quote is "not 1 inch eastward." And that quote,
right, yes.
That quote was particularly referring to the reunification of East and West Germany. And the worry was that if Germany reunified, that NATO would begin to move armed forces into Eastern Germany. And that's why Eastern Germany, I think to this day, although it might have changed in the past few months, had remained demilitarized, was because the reunification of Germany we would hope that from NATO, there would not be movement 1 inch eastward into Germany. That didn't mean that NATO was never going to expand at all. And if it did, and this is always a good question, because you're like, no, that was a promise that they were never going to expand. Well, then why the fuck wouldn't you get that in writing? Because there wasn't a memorandum, there wasn't a signature, there wasn't anything. There was no treaty, there was nothing saying that NATO would expand ever. And also, the idea that these negotiations that are happening in 89, 90, 91, the idea that these negotiations would carry forward into the future when the security status has changed all across Europe, when the Soviet Union doesn't even exist anymore, and when none of these supposed promises about NATO expanding were never even made in writing, I think is a little unfair. Right. Like, you can't say like, well, somebody said, I think a long time ago, even though there wasn't an agreement, that you wouldn't expand anymore. Now it's like, well, come on, what are we even talking about at this point, you know?
So then here's the question.
Yeah, go for it.
Why did Ukraine give up its nukes? Why would you do that? I mean, that okay.
Probably because a lot of pressure, because having nukes just makes the world a scarier place. And I think everybody wants people to have less nukes.
But for some, it might make it a safer place, like a Ukraine.
Yeah, but there's going to be pressure
if you're on the border with the Soviet Union and you don't want any more Soviet Union expansion. I mean, again, this is hypothetical, hindsight's 2020, but for example, okay, if they had the second most amount of nukes to us, and somebody was like, you guys, we want the world to be a safer place. Can you please give up your nukes? We'd be like, get the fuck out of here.
Sure, but I mean, like, we've got the money, because, I mean, it costs a lot of money to maintain an active nuclear arsenal, which I believe their nuclear arsenal was active. And it would probably be nicer for them to be like, okay, listen, we're not going to waste money doing this. Our country's already corrupt and like wasting money on everything. Like, as long as we can at least ensure. And what's the main purpose of having nuclear weapons? One of them is, well, maybe arguably the main purpose is to ensure your territorial integrity. And as long as I can get in writing from, I want to say it was the US, France, Germany, and Russia, I think, that signed on to 3 different Budapest memorandums. I think it was for Belarus. One was for Belarus, one was for Ukraine, and a third one was for another country. I don't even fucking remember right now. But the idea was that basically, okay, we can toss all of our nukes. We don't have to worry about maintaining any of this bullshit. And at the very least, we don't have to worry about people invading us. That was like the goal of it.
Okay. So then here's another question that I have, because again, I think it's one of those. By the way, everybody has been saying they love the discussion, and there was one other person that said this. He said, "I just finished the Keffals manifesto on Destiny's channel. This is what real reporting looks like." So I wanted to give you kudos to that. So that's amazing. And like I said, because I know I see your chat, I'm looking at him, and they're like, "She's an RT shrill," and I'm like, No, guys, I honestly, I'll say this too. On my show, which was a primetime show, I normally talked about what was going on in the United States. So I talked mainly about, and I had some crazy guests on. Like I had Ben Crump, who was the who represented George Floyd and many other, Black families with who have had somebody shot by the police. So I talked a lot about the police brutality stuff. I talked about the school lunch programs and how they were getting rid of school lunch programs. And again, this was all under Republican leadership too.
Sure.
But when it came to the Russia stuff, a lot of it, I get that it's like we're looking at it in a vacuum of like, oh, this is happening right now. But I feel like there's just so much history that all gets tied
to be clear, yeah, I'm not looking at it in a vacuum. I think there is a lot of history, and I love digging into the history of it all. Yeah,
we are definitely not. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think American media, they're for example, when the invasion happened, it was, just from a media standpoint, it was Russia's bad. They're evil. They've invaded. Putin wants all of Ukraine back, and this is what's happening.
True. All those statements you made, though, those are all true. 100% true.
If Putin wanted Ukraine, I feel like he, being the madman that we say that he is, and I'm not arguing saying that he's not. But if he really did want all of Ukraine, why wouldn't he just go all the way in?
He tried to. That was the issue. The issue was that here's the issue. The issue is that you're always playing, even though people think that like, military industrial complex, blah, blah, blah. Even in a hyper authoritarian state like Russia, you still have to balance out the will of your people with, what your personal will is as a dictator. Now, in the United States, you have to be more careful because you can lose elections and have people voted out, which will fuck you. So in Russia, you don't have to be as careful, but you still have to be a little careful. Like when he moved in and he took Crimea, he got a huge boon in popularity. People loved that. It was awesome, patriotic vibes, took some shit back from Ukraine, fuck the West, blah, blah, blah. People felt good about that. He needed to, the goal was with a limited amount of troops. I say limited, but I'm pretty sure it was still like 200,000 troops I think they had in their initial invasion. Go in, capture Kyiv, kick out Zelensky, put in a new leader, and then get everything cool. Probably get Crimea given completely to Russia, and then having the Luhansk and Donetsk declared like independent states, like they've done in Transnistria or Moldova, like they've done in Georgia. That was the goal. That was the roadmap. But the problem was they severely underestimated Ukraine's army and they severely overestimated their army. And I think that's the reason why. It wasn't like the will wasn't there. Like Putin absolutely wanted to do this, of course, and he looks horrible to his own people now, right? Like this dude is like slated for death right now. Okay, Putin knows it. He's probably going to be dead after this conflict because shit is fucked for him.
And that is the one thing that when you do talk to some Russians, well, first of all, the weird part is like, for example, in Moscow, and I have friends that are there. That have been here, they're American, and they were like, because I'm like, what is it like there? Are you guys hearing stuff? And they're like, do you remember being at home when we went to war with Iraq? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, that's how it is in Moscow. And maybe it's just because, now granted, you also have a lot of the pull of American companies and there's other little things, but I'm talking about like seeing war and all that stuff. They don't
But what you just said there, that's intentional. And that's because they hadn't been doing, they call it mobilization, we call it drafting, but it's because they didn't want to have this huge pull for where the citizens felt like they were at war. But now, as of recently, now we're getting more videos out, and Russian opinion is, if it hasn't already, it's going to start to change because now they're starting to feel it at home in the form of like the economic problems they're having, but also because now they're actually drafting, they're actually conscripting people, which is stuff that is going to make them feel that war a lot more than they did before, which is probably going to cause some opinion to turn on that. Yeah.
Right. Now, the one question though that, and this is another one where you do see propaganda from both sides. For example, and folks, again, I know the propaganda that's put out, particularly from the Russian side. For example, you often hear that Crimea was taken over without one shot being fired. That's one of the Russian points, and that it was just a memorandum. Whereas you do hear that there was some kerfuffles that happened, but the big thing is that you're hearing with these regions in the east, particularly like the Donbass region, and I believe the two below, that they voted a referendum to go back to Russia. and you have Western media saying that many people were held at gunpoint to go vote, but then saying that there are mostly Russian people, Russian-speaking people there, and the fact that many of the Ukrainians that were there were killed from the famine and starved to death. To me, it just seems strange to say that they had a gun held to their head when many of them are already Russian. Russian. What's not native, but ethnic Russians.
Sure, a lot of them are ethnic Russians, but just because they're ethnic Russians doesn't mean they like Russia, right? Ukraine has a very sordid past with the Soviet Union. It's not like all flowery like people, in the West like to say when we talk about this. In the West, we have enemies, and they're called Nazis, and that's all we ever care about. And we don't really think about like communists as being enemies. Well, older people do, but the younger generation now, like the Soviet Union was awesome. They were cool. I like Che Guevara. I like Castro. I like Stalin, like all these people, like really awesome. But for people in Ukraine, that wasn't the case, okay? Or for people in Poland, that wasn't the case. The Soviet Union were basically fucking Nazis to these people. There were issues with, was it called the Katyn massacre? I don't remember. Where I think it was like a bunch of like people fled Poland into the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union turned them right back to the Nazis and had them all lined up and killed. There was a lot of like.
Well, then you had major parts of Ukraine that went with the Nazis. Like, for example, there was the one horrible massacre of Jews in Ukraine, and then that's where you hear the talk of Ukrainian Nazis that are still there, and that's another one that's very, very. That's a weird one, because you do see videos where there are people where they've got the Nazi logos, and then you see other ones where they're like, no, there is no Nazis here. And it's kind of like,
sure.
The part that I just think it's interesting as an American is we think, okay, World War II's done. Like, there's no more Nazis. We're good, right? And it's like, oh no, there's a lot of shit still brewing from that, even though it was in the 1940s.
Sure. And I understand that like people will point to like Bandera and stuff. And it's funny because like I'll see, it's always conservatives do this. So in the United States, we've had the privilege of being able to go back and do like this intense like snowflake campaign of like every single person that was ever pro-slavery, I want to take down all of their statues, and I want to rename the schools and the streets. Everything needs to be called Martin Luther King Boulevard and blah. And that's what all the liberals do in the US, and the conservatives are like, fuck you, that's our history, fuck you, I don't care if there's slavery, fuck you. And you know what? I'm actually more sympathetic to the conservative arguments there. I don't think we need to go back and relabel every single fucking street statue in school to somebody that was like, pro, trans ethnic minorities in the 1940s. I
think it also needs to be said too that Robert E. Lee was, if he was alive today, he was very much against that. He even wrote in one of his speeches, he did not want any monuments brought up, symbolizing and what's the word, memorizing or memorializing any Confederate soldiers. He did not want that, which I thought was like, okay, based.
Yeah. So but then when it comes to Ukraine, that has an incredibly complicated history with Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, conservatives will look at a small regiment of troops, the Azov Battalion. They'll see that there's a percentage of them that might use like neo-Nazi insignia, and all of a sudden, all of Ukraine is painted as a Nazi country. And this is one of those mindfuck moments where I look at the left and the right and I go, oh, you guys don't have a principled position on this. You're just saying whatever the fuck you can, because they're engaging in the same type of tactics that they would accuse progressives of engaging in the West. When a progressive says, oh, I know you're a Nazi, how the fuck do you know that? Well, because you were in a Facebook group that was pro-Trump, and one of those people in that group that was pro-Trump also posts Nazi memes 100%. On 4chan. So and it's like, okay, wait, that doesn't make me a fucking Nazi. I didn't even know that guy. But conservatives will point to Ukraine and they'll go, there's a Nazi problem in all of Ukraine. How is there a Nazi problem in all of Ukraine? Ukraine was the only country in the world besides Israel to have a president and vice president that were both fucking Jewish. And if you're looking for like big anti-Semitic violence or any of this shit, it's not, you can't find it. It's not in Ukraine. For a country that has such a huge Nazi problem, you would expect them to have way less favorable opinion towards Jews. When they were polled prior to 2014, I think that they were one of the most pro-Jewish countries across all of Europe. And you would expect them to not elect Jewish people to fucking office. There is no anti-Semitism to be found other than like these fucking pictures that you get of like, yeah. And then that ignores the whole complicated affair of like, well, who started the Wagner group, the paramilitary, thing that's ran by fucking Russia. Yeah. What about like all of the anti-Semitic shit that comes out of St. Petersburg, where you've got these terrorists that are performing terrorist attacks in fucking Sweden that are trained in Russia? I don't like the Nazi argument. I think it's bullshit. I think it's a smokescreen. I don't think anybody that's done any serious digging would take that argument seriously, because if there was a Nazi problem, you wouldn't have to prove it to me with like weird pictures and then opening like your book of like, you know, crazy Nazi memes to go, okay, hold on, let me tell you why they've got a Nazi problem. So this skull with the two things on it and that symbol actually comes from this, and it's like, bro, show me the dead Jews, okay? That when you tell me there's a Nazi problem, I expect to see Jewish people dead on the street or pogroms or something, you know? But sorry, hold on.
Well,
No,
you're good. No, like I said, folks love the discussion, because I think it's one of those. I see a lot of what comes out of, you know, because and I know your chat's like, oh, she's fair and balanced. No, I really try to look across the spectrum of every single media outlet when I look, you know, at the news of the day. I look at CNN, MSNBC, ABC, Fox. I look at RT, I look at TRT, I look at France 24. You know, I have a lot of friends that are in the international news outlets, because one thing you don't know, when you're in local news for a long time, your pay doesn't really go up. So what a lot of anchors do is they go work for an international network, because
Makes
they
sense, yeah.
give more money, you know, which at the time RT had contacted me, and I was kind of like, okay, you know, and I will tell you this, here's the craziest part. Working at RT made me go more left, believe it or not. And maybe it was because looking more at the inequalities, or looking more at, like, for example, I'll 100% agree with you when you said that part of the propaganda is looking at not just, you know, or looking at all these other countries that are corrupt, you know, knowing that they're corrupt themselves, but look at everybody else who's corrupt too. That was one of the things that actually made me look deeper into corruption that was going on here, which pushed me more to the progressive side, which I thought, like when you said that, I was like, well, that's kind of interesting, because that's what made me kind of open my eyes a little bit. So it was, you know, good and bad there. But the other thing though too is yes, the main hub does that. Yes, there is that propaganda. But then I think the West can also do it too. I mean, you have stuff that the UK has done, France has done, all that other stuff. You know, I don't know how you feel about like the Queen of England, but like, you know, there were other, you know, people saying, oh, this is colonialism, and then the Queen is awful, you know, all of this. And they don't look at their own problems too. Like for, you know, like I'm just using like the UK as an example. But I think that every country though does have its problems. It has its history of problems. But yeah, it's very interesting though, like when you said that is one of their tactics, because I 100% do agree with that.
The only thing I would say, my only pushback to that is that, like, I don't know if you've not to get really personal ever, but sometimes I compare people's this kind of analysis to like, do you have any experience or have friends that have ever been like in abusive relationships?
Yes.
So something that happens a lot is this idea where it's like, you know, we'll use traditional gender roles since men are the best at abuse. Woman and a guy are together, guy hits the woman or is abusive to the woman physically.
Right.
And the line of dialogue that always stems from that is like, okay, sure, I hit you, but you did this and this and this and this and this. You nagged me when I got home. You didn't give me enough attention. You didn't blah, blah. And it's like, fuck. And at the end of the day, the victim ends up kind of getting this weird war where like, okay, fuck. Sure, he hits me, but like, is it maybe, you know, I did bad things too. And I kind of get, I push back a lot against this false equivalency where people say that like, and they do this a lot, American progressives do this a lot when it comes to U.S. foreign policy. People say like, U.S. foreign policy is so bad, you know? How can we criticize Russia when U.S. foreign policy is what it is? U.S. foreign policy is way fucking better than Russia's today, okay? Like, if you look at how Russia conducted itself in the Chechen civil wars, and you look at some of the cities they fucking destroyed. You look at how Putin conducted operations in fucking Aleppo. You look at, like, you see that same battle plan carried over.
Even them in Afghanistan.
Yes.
They had more people die in Afghanistan than we did.
Yeah. The U.S. definitely has made mistakes, but not to be a huge U.S. simp, because I am a far left person and fuck America, but not to be a huge U.S. simp, but we do try to get things right. We do try to hold ourselves accountable. We do answer to international committees on human affairs and stuff more than other countries do. And I do think generally we have a moral authority or moral right over what fucking Russia does. I do believe that to be the case.
Absolutely, 100%. And you cannot tell me ever, you know, like you do have some of those people where, you know, you do, for example, like if you give one criticism of the United States, like, well, then why don't you move to fucking Russia? It's like, hell no. But, you know, let's look at, like, for example, maybe I'm going to flip the script on you. And let's say you're in a relationship with a man and a woman, and the woman is more, she's not abusive, but she's more of a nagger, like, why didn't you do this? And why aren't you taking out the garbage? And why aren't you doing all of this? And finally, he's like, shut the fuck up. And he's like, you know what? I'm gone. I'm done. And he leaves. You can't tell me that the woman is going to be like, did I do some shit wrong? Did I maybe fuck up a little bit here and there? And that's where I think sometimes, you know, do I think a lot of countries hate us? No, but there's a lot of countries that don't like us.
For sure, that is true.
And it's one of those things, should we sometimes look a little bit inward and say, are there things that we do that maybe is a little bit too forceful or too aggressive to some of these other countries? Not that I'm saying that we still, I mean, I want us to be the biggest superpower in the world. I like the United States when we run the show, but are there times where we're unfair? And I think that's where sometimes we need to acknowledge that.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. There are definitely times we should. We just have to keep in mind, like, what is the overall, you know, like Biden a few days ago is trying to say that we need to reschedule marijuana and maybe start moving in a direction towards national legalization. And
I was like, thank you.
Yeah. And Russia a few months ago locked up a black woman because she had fucking weed on her for who knows how many fucking years. You know, there is a difference between these two countries, even if we do make mistakes. And it's good. We should hold ourselves to a high standard. I do agree with that. But at the end of the day, okay, we're way better than Russia. Fuck them.
Right. But now you're talking about, you know, for example, like us wanting peace and us wanting to do, or when I say peace, I mean, you know, if there's a country, for example, like Ukraine, that's going through a lot of stuff, you know, that we do want to help. We do want to make it so that other countries can look to us if they need help. And I am all for that. However, at this moment in time, and again, the original money going out to Ukraine, I was like, okay, I think we're partially responsible. Yeah, we do kind of need to help them. We kind of helped them get a little bit in this kerfuffle, as I said, you know, with, you know, the Euromaidan coup and, you know, the NATO flirting and all that other stuff. You know, this has made me think a little bit differently or think more in depth on a lot of stuff. So I thank you for that. But my question is, though, is we have so many problems here now.
Yep.
And we just keep funneling money, more and more and more and more money. And it's like, we have 1 in 6 kids in the United States that goes to bed hungry. They're starting to end, you know, Republicans are going to start ending the school lunch programs, you know, state by state, county by county, all that other stuff. And it's like, well, where are these kids going to eat? And you know, 1 in 6 kids are food insecure. So it's like, when I look at all the money that we're sending over, it's like, okay, but at what cost? We're seeing inflation go up, you know, all of that. So I'm sorry.
I'm sympathetic towards you there. I understand that. But the problem is it's not a one-to-one trade-off. Like, just if we were to stop sending money to Ukraine, it's not like Republicans in the United States are suddenly going to be like, you know what? I actually really liked the added stimulus for children that Biden approved under the coronavirus.
100%.
And that's the issue. And it's funny because this exact same line of dialogue played out with Corbyn and Farage and in the UK when it happened, when Brexit came by, right? And they had buses rolling around where they're like, we send 250 million pounds a day to the European Union. All of that could be going to the NHS is what it's called over there, right? Everybody was saying that. Everybody's saying that. Well, they did Brexit and the NHS is still being cut. So it's like, well, what the fuck is happening, you know? And it's another smokescreen by conservatives that I just don't believe when they're like, oh, well, you know, like, we need to be spending this money at home. Then fucking do it. But Republicans never vote for this shit. What the fuck are you talking about? We need money for kids in school. Now you care about the kids in school because you hate the Ukrainians so much? Like, I just don't buy it. I understand what you're saying, but like, yeah. I don't, it's not one or the other. Also, it's not like we have like limited budgets or monies. It's like, oh shit, we've only got $100. How are we going to spend it? Like, we theoretically can run our monetary policy. We have incredibly loosely. Yeah, if it was like one or the other, that I could see that being a legitimate argument. If we had like all this legislation on the table for helping kids in schools and all that, I love that shit. I am a father. Okay, that's amazing that we would do that for kids. But it's never the case that Republicans are like, we were just about to vote on this huge stimulus for single parent households, and then they sent money to Ukraine, and now they've lost my vote. You know?
Well, and that was one of the things where, and 100% on the Republican take, because they use that as a smokescreen all the time, and it pisses the hell out of me. Because they did that with the, they were really pissed at the Democrats. And I even had a fight a little bit with my audience on this because they were like, no, Faran, they wanted to give veterans more when it was the whole smoke burning pits where it was with Jon Stewart.
Ooh, Jon Stewart had to go in front of Congress to fight for the 9/11 people too. Jesus, yeah.
Exactly. And you know, and they still are fighting to get them more health care. But you had Jon Stewart going in front of Congress for the burn pit victims, the soldiers. And the Democrats, like 3 days later, passed the stimulus bill. And all of a sudden, the Republicans now are like, we're not passing it anymore. And they were like, what in the hell? And they were like, well, no, it's we don't know where the money's going. And it's like, yeah, it's going to fucking the soldiers. Well, now, and then when they got beaten so bad over the brow, then it was, well, no, we want to give them more money. And it was like, oh, shut up. You know, like, and that's what I kept saying. They didn't do it because they wanted to give them more money. They were trying to stick it to the Democrats because Joe Manchin finally folded. But it was one of those things where I think 100% I agree that they don't give a shit about us. And that's my problem, is that I feel like, and it's not that I don't care about Ukraine. And I see in the chat, like, you know, well, Ukrainians are getting shot at. I 100% understand. But at what cost? I mean, because again, our inflation's going up. We, you know, our military industrial, the military is getting a shit ton of money doing this. But then also at the same time, you have it where we just sent off a bunch of our javelins to Ukraine, where let's say if China were gonna come and attack us, we got nothing. We got nothing.
I don't think. Well, nobody's attacking the United States. I think we're okay.
Obviously, yes. Yeah. But what I'm saying though is, it's like, you know, aren't we supposed to kind of keep ourselves strong too in the times of, you know, this heightened aggression?
I think we're probably pretty safe. I think that right now the scariest person to be is probably Russia, because you're the one that's. I think that if China was going to attack anybody, it would probably be Russia for threatening nuclear weapons. I don't 100%. Think that nobody in the world wants that right now.
Right. Yeah. And China needs us more than we need them. A lot of people act like, or a lot of people think that we need China more, which when it comes to manufacturing and stuff, yeah, like we don't make shit here. We don't. But China's not that dumb, because they would lose their payday real quick.
We have a very symbiotic relationship with the entire world, really. This is why trading is so good. This is one of the few things that libertarians have right, and that, like, when you trade with everybody, nobody really wants to fuck with each other. Just be like, it's like what do they say? It's like friend to all, ally to none, or something like that. That, like, building these economic relationships out is generally like a pretty good thing, yeah. But
well, and that's the one thing where I will say that I think, because, you know, we have, although I feel like we have a lot of different people in both of our chats right now. I feel like they're truthfully, because I see some in your chat that hate me. There's some that are like, no, she's base. Then I see some in my chat where they're like, he's base, and some where he's like, he's so wrong, he's a globalist. And
I am a globalist, by the way. I'm a globalist establishment shill. 100% unironically, but yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I love that you admit it, because I think that's important.
It is.
But two, I personally don't like the derogatory tone that comes with the term globalist, and I'll tell you why. I did an opening to my show one day where I talked about how so many different things around the world we're seeing prices rise around the world. Yeah. And you can see it happen from one event. You know, for example, if you look at, you know, Ukraine.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
For example, like you have the war in Ukraine.
Okay. Just as a real quick before you go off on that, there's this gets into astrology. I don't know if you believe in astrology.
I'm a chick. Of course I believe in astrology.
Okay, well,
what are you? Are you a Scorpio? Are you a water sign?
No. We have our own form of astrology over in the male world, okay? And it's called macroecon, okay? So there's people say that, like, the Ukrainian war is causing inflation. The reality is the United States has ran a very loose monetary policy for like fucking 15 years. Yes. For a long time. So, and it's always hard. Like, macroecon is regardless of what any macroeconomists tell you, it's very retrospective. We kind of look in the past like, okay, what the fuck happened? Because trying to make predictions is very difficult. But this has been building for a long time because of very, very, very lax monetary policy in the US, among a ton of other things. So I will just say that, like, obviously the war in Ukraine is going to be causing issues relating to inflation, but I wouldn't blame everything on the war in Ukraine. This has been like stuff that's been building for a long time because of how we've ran our monetary policy. I would just say that.
Right.
Fiscal and monetary policy. Sorry, but go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say I think a lot of the problems stemmed from, at least in the United States, you could start to see the problems start to boil up a little bit during like Carter Reagan, I think was when a lot of stuff got changed and we're starting to see the effects. I feel like we really don't see the effects until 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 years later, which
maybe. I mean, I was gonna, like, one thing is, so for instance, like, it's just weird because, like, so I don't know if you've seen reports now, but like people are complaining about like home ownership rates are going down. It's hard to get a mortgage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, yeah, of course, that's the whole point of like raising the federal funds rate. We want that to cool off because housing prices have been climbing like crazy because they've been spurred on by massive cuts in the interest rates. Like, fuck, Jesus. I want to say like 2 years ago, I think you could refinance on a loan for like less than 3 points. I think you get like 2.5% fucking mortgages and shit. It's fucking insane. But then when you try to like tighten your monetary policy a little bit, you try to up the rates a little bit. Now people are like, oh my God, houses are getting, mortgages are making it outside of reach of people. It's like, well, yeah, that's the whole point, of course. But anytime you try to like pump the brakes a little bit on an economy that's fucking out of control, people start to get like really ass mad over it. Like, well, you're doing the wrong thing. It's like, well, no, it hurts a little bit, but it's kind of what we have to do, you know? Yeah.
Well, and that's where I get so annoyed with Republicans because they'll be like, can you believe that they're raising the rates? And it's like, well, yeah, we don't want another fucking housing crisis like 2008. You know, like, you know,
and you even had Trump threatening to fire, was it Powell back then, or was it, I don't know if it was Powell or the other guy. But yeah, you have Trump threatening to fire the guy when he talked about raising rates, and that was just for talking about raising the rates. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, there's ebbs and flows to the economy, and that's where I think, while we would all love for it to stay very low all the time, it's just not going to happen. But I was talking strictly more on just events that happen and what it does just to commerce. For example, like the war in Ukraine. Okay, Ukraine is known as the breadbasket of Europe, sometimes even the breadbasket of the world. That's why you're starting to see prices of grain go up all over the place. Or, for example, South America is in a drought. Has your Dunkin' or Starbucks gone up a little bit? A little bit. There's a reason for that, because they're in a drought. We also have the drought here, for example, where we're dealing, you know, there was kind of more along the lines of dealing more with corn, to which China loves high fructose corn syrup because that's, you know, what they use to, you know, feed their pig farms. You know, it's kind of like, and then not even that, with the pig farms, they get their fertilizer from Russia, and Russia and the rest of Europe, they're having a little bit of an energy crisis with the coal because they get a lot of their coal from China, and China's having a problem. What I'm saying is that when you hear the term globalist, it sounds like a dirty word, but it's like, no, we are a global, the global homo. But it's like, no, we are a global world where if, you know, a drought here, you know, or, you know, what's that phrase where, you know, butterfly ripples can, you know, I forget
the butterfly
what it is,
flaps its wings in Tokyo and it hurricanes in New York or some shit. Yeah,
exactly. You know, and you do see that even just down to where Americans feel it most the first is the grocery store. You know, and that was one of the things that I talked about on my show of, you know, why is it that globalist is a dirty word? Because we are a globe. We all live on this world together. But yeah, it's one of those things though. When you say globalist though, maybe is it your thinking is what makes it a dirty word? I don't know. When you hear globalist, what is your thinking on the word?
I mean, I'm a pro-globalist guy. I think the reason why people take issues with quote unquote globalists is because there's been you have this kind of like divide of the has-beens or the have and the have-nots in the world, where there are these people that are obviously benefiting from kind of this global exchange of goods and ideas. The city dwellers, people that are working in these like high-tech fields, and they're booming. They're doing amazingly well because of the interconnectedness of the world. Then you've got kind of this quieter group, especially rural people, that kind of feel like they're getting left behind, and they feel like they're getting fucked. They're not growing as much economically. Things around them are getting more expensive. The culture is starting to look very like queer and alien compared to them, and they're just like, what the fuck is happening? The world is changing very, 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 very quickly around them. And I think that liberals in general, or people on the left in general, have done a really, really, really bad time of hearing the complaints and issues of those rural people. And yeah, so when somebody usually uses the insult of globalist, what they're usually saying is that like, you're somebody that cares more about like global society than your own countrymen. I think that's like the insult. And I think to some extent that does seem to be the case with a lot of kind of like left-leaning people in these big cities, where it feels like they're citizens of the world, which is all fine and dandy, except for when your own countrymen are suffering, you feel like they're ignoring the pleas of like those people. Mm-hmm. Which in a way kind of goes back to what you were saying before, where it's like, why are we sending money to Ukraine when we should be spending money at home? Or for domestic policy, somebody might say, why are you letting in more immigrants when we have our own like meth problems in the Midwest? Or why are we doing this when we could be funding that? Why, yeah.
And to that, the immigrant problem, this is what I would say. I don't know if this is a hot take or not.
Opening a whole new can of worms. Go.
Yeah, I know, right? As far as those immigrants coming here, I think it's because we kind of fucked up their country. I think a lot of those countries we've kind of fucked up a little bit in South America, and whether it be coups, whether it be overthrowing of governments, whether it be, them not being able to establish themselves, and then we come in and try to do it and we fail. I mean, because there have been times, like you said, and I think we can agree, there's been times where the United States has failed. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of that is from some of what we've done. That's just me.
Sure, it could be, depending on what you're talking about, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But with that said, I think, and like I said, whether you love me, you hate Destiny, or you love Destiny and you hate me, I think it's one of those things where I've learned a lot today from you. And nice. Like I said, I am so. I know it sounds like so cheesy and fangirl, but I'm so honored, honestly, to have this conversation with you, because I think there's things that I've seen in my world, there's things that you see in your world, there's just a lot that I think we discussed a lot today, and I think that some of it I think we probably got surface level. I would love to talk to you again about this kind of stuff. I am available whenever you need me, because I just think it's great to have these kinds of conversations, because they're not had enough. Sure. And I honestly, I'm sick and tired of, as somebody that was in the media, of seeing somebody come on, with another person that they disagree with, and it's 3 minutes of just them screaming over each other, and, well, I'm right and you're wrong, well, you're wrong and I'm right, and it's like, well, where do you get at the end of the day?
No.
There's things that you've made me think about. I hope there's maybe some things, that you're kind of like, okay, maybe I get why she gets that, or, okay, but I just think it's one of those things where I'm very thankful for the discussion, and I would love to have it again, maybe, hopefully not after the nuke bomb dropped. Hopefully we can avoid that, but definitely in the future.
Yeah, sure. Whenever a topic comes on, if there's anything interesting, yeah, you can always just send me a message, or yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And for those that for folks to find you, where can they find you? Because I did see that you were booted off Twitch.
Banned off a lot of things.
Twitter. And
no, yeah, Twitch and Twitter. Yeah.
I mean, actually, really quick, if you have like just 10 more minutes.
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
This whole banning bullshit, that's where I think it starts, like, in the beginning, where we can't have, it's like, nobody really bans the popular position. Nobody bans the unpopular positions. They ban the popular position that might be controversial or they might not like or what have you. And then that's where I think that you lose that discussion to be had. Why were you, for my audience that doesn't know, why were you banned on Twitch and Twitter?
So I was banned on, I truly don't even.
By the way, I love your audience. They're like, oh shit, another hour.
Yeah, no, you're good.
I'll try to be quick, I promise.
Everybody's really vague about what you get banned for, so I can't truly know. And some people get mad when I say, so I don't know. I guess I'll say hesitantly. When I got banned from Twitch, all they said it was for was hate speech. Now, I don't know what that means because I don't use slurs on my stream.
Honestly, I'm all about free speech on my stream, so if you want to say it, go right ahead.
I'm okay. I don't even have the desire to. I've been reformed, okay? That was me and... 20. I used to be a gamer. Okay, we said a lot of crazy things back then. Okay, but no.
And you know what's interesting? Really quick, what was so interesting, because I know the reason and what was said and whatnot. And what's so interesting is Nick Rekieta last night was talking about like the gamer movement and how things that were said on stream to each other and like in the lobbies and stuff. He was like, I mean, you want to talk about a men's locker room? That was 10 times worse during like the gamer era.
For gaming shit, there are like things being said that would make Hitler blush. Okay, it was those chat rooms were fucking wild. Yeah. That's the world I come out of. But I was banned from Twitch for hate speech. I don't know why. I theorized at the time it was because I had a pretty big stance against trans athletes competing with cis athletes. But other people say maybe it's because I said mean things about people on Twitter. But I don't know. Like I said, I don't use hateful slurs. It wasn't for anything like that, and they didn't say specifically what it was. So who's to know? And then on Twitter, I believe that my account, it's hard to get an exact answer on this, but it was for inciting violence against minorities. But it was back when I was a really big SJW on Twitter, and the only thing I could guess was because I think the tweet that got reported was I made fun of a lot of alt-righters for being really racially diverse. And I don't know if that was interpreted as like a racist tweet by like the Twitter algorithm or whatever, but that account got nuked for that. And then I've been banned ever since for like ban evasion, because if you're banned once, you're perma-banned, I guess. So.
Wow. Huh.
Great stuff.
And there is, okay, because you brought up one more thing too that I totally forgot I wanted to mention. So when I was telling my audience today, I was like, I'm gonna be talking to Destiny. If you don't know him, he started as a big gaming streamer and all this other stuff. And what were you? You were like 4th in the world for, I can't remember which game it was. Or they said you were ranked super high. I can't remember what game it was.
I used to play StarCraft 2. I wasn't 4th in the world.
That was it.
I was like okay for an American player, but I wasn't like ultra. Yeah, go on.
And how I actually first got to know you was through my younger brother, who's a big gamer. And he was like, you know Destiny? And I was like, this was years ago. And I was like, and no offense, I was like, no, I don't know her. And he's like, it's a guy.
Yeah, nice.
And I was like, oh, okay. One of the things though is my audience said, like we know of him, and somebody said the word. They said, he seems to be getting a little bit more red-pilled lately.
Yeah, people say that.
And I was gonna say, you hear globalist, I just and then I hear red-pilled, and I'm like because again, I don't like to be tied really to any party just for journalism stuff, but I do have my opinions. However, when you hear red-pilled though, it does have that negative connotation, and it's like, why does it have to be red? Like, now granted, there are times, especially as of late, where you will see more conservatives being like, free speech, free speech. I think there are liberals too. And even you used to see more liberals back in the day, especially during Vietnam, that were more about free speech and anti-war. And they were silenced by the right. So we've seen it, change throughout history.
Yeah, that's another thing. It really irritates me that people talk about like how important freedom of speech is and how liberals attack and blah, blah, blah. And I do agree that like progressive establishments are not the biggest fans of freedom of speech. I do agree with that. But all these conservatives were silent when Trump said that the media was the enemy of the people and he wanted to sue them all for libel. And I'm like, bro, that's a wild statement to make. Even if you think they do lie about the president of the United States, if Obama said some shit like that, you guys would be losing your fucking mind.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, again, you do see the hypocrisy truly on both sides, I think, but when they say red-pilled, like I said, I don't agree with that. But you said, when you said yourself a crazy SJW warrior, or SJW, how has your politics changed at all from your time on Twitter versus now, and what has changed for you and why?
That's a whole other complicated question, but like basically I've gotten more in touch with like how do politics work in the real world, like what does it mean to pass a bill, what is the relationship between voters and like politicians, why is national polling fucking worthless? I used to be a big like 45% of Americans polling, and it's like, well, that doesn't matter because we don't take national votes on things, right? It matters district by district, state by state. So it's mainly just becoming more informed with how the particular political processes work. I think that's probably been the biggest like improvement I've made on my understanding of the world.
And I think one of the biggest things that hit me and kind of rocked my world when I first got to DC was here I thought they always, like I said, I'll just leave this with your audience. Here I always thought that everything was always on the next election, whether it be the midterms or the presidential election. And when you get to DC and you start, mingling in those circles, and you start meeting people who are chief of staff for so-and-so and so-and-so, you start to learn they don't give a shit about the midterm or the next presidency. They work in 6 and 8 year time spans, because a lot of their attitudes is, well, we don't really care. Like there's like, for example, like one of my friends who's a chief of staff for a well-known libertarian, she told me, she was like, granted, there are going to be your circles where they do care about who's the Speaker of the House and who's the president, so they can run that. She's like, but what they really care about, though, is the Senate and the House, and whose races are going to be, impactful. And we're looking at senators, we're looking 6 years out. We're trying to see, okay, if he gets old or if something happens, he's got to start mingling with these people. And they start almost testing the waters with all these different people. And you're just kind of like, so then when do you worry about shit that's actually going on? And, and a lot of them, they do and they don't. But for the most part, they are looking so far down the line. And I remember even asking one of my other friends, I was like, what is it more like? Is it more like Veep, or is it like House of Cards? And she was like, a little bit of both. She's like, when it comes to day-to-day stuff, hands down, fucking Veep. She's like, but when it comes to, like the House of Cards angle, she's like, it's always 6, 8. She's like, sometimes even 10 years down the line, who they're starting to groom, and who they're bringing up behind the scenes, and how perfect they got to be, and they start watching these people, and it's so interesting, because you think. You do hear about those one-offs like an AOC where it's like, I'm going to run, but it's one of these things where the rest of them, though, they're thinking of the next one, and the one after that, and the one after that. Yeah. So it's been really, really interesting. Let me just kind of go through really quick, see if anybody had to ask you a question here. Hang on one second. From VFM, you guys getting exhausted beating those straw men? Are you?
I always bring people on after if they want to argue. If they think it's something incorrect, you can always shoot me a message and we can come on and fight. Yeah.
I love it. Ukraine is a sovereign country. It shouldn't have been invaded. All countries have some sort of corruption. Praying for peace. We can't afford a nuclear warfare. Totally agree. Obama. Okay. Thank you, Zarks. American media is in the Democratic pocket. What do you think?
No, I think some media leans left, some media leans right. Like CNN and MSNBC are clearly left-leaning. Fox News is clearly right-leaning. A lot of the radio talk shows are probably still pretty right-leaning. Just depends on what you're watching. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say this too. There was one thing that I did agree with Anna Kasparian on when she debated Prager, where when he said, the media is on the left pocket, and she was like, well, you get a lot of corporations and a lot of the neocon companies that donate to the right. So I think they're both making a shit ton of money. Let's just say that. Hannity was making what, 20 million? Chris Cuomo was making 26 million. Rachel Maddow like 30 million a year. So it's spread out evenly, I think.
Sure.
Let's see, John, Iraq was more than 28 days. I was there. I was told by H.R. McMasters we had a war in the desert to prepare for in late '89. He was my company commander, 2nd Armored Cav.
I thought, didn't we capture or oust Saddam Hussein within
we were there from 03 to 09, I thought, or for a while.
Well, no, but the occupation was a long time. But in terms to take apart basically the entire military, I thought the invasion, the brunt of the fighting was done in about a month, I thought.
Yeah, and then I think we just kind of decided to, yeah. P.D. Warren asked him to explain all of Keffals. I think we kind of did that a little bit. And also you have the Keffals manifesto too. We talked a little bit about that in the beginning. So if you missed it, scroll back. P.D. Warren again, Destiny, be nice to my girl. Farron is as sincere as it gets. Farron, welcome back, gorgeous. Great to see these kinds of collaborations. Me too. John Yarber, 10,000 Mules. What do you think about that movie? Did you watch it?
Yeah, I did.
What'd you think?
Horrible.
You know, well, here's the only thing that I will say about it.
Yeah.
Okay, I watched it and you're kind of like, oh damn, that's crazy. But then they like removed it from every like Borders and wherever the hell they were selling it. They completely retracted it.
Okay.
Which made me think like, and then there's now all these lawsuits that are happening, and it's kind of like, huh. And Dinesh D'Souza sometimes can be a little sketch, so yeah. Or most of the time. Well done, Destiny. And one-on-one question, you have established Faran has a soul.
Nice.
Okay.
I will say for the problem with was it 10,000 mules or 2,000 mules? I thought it was 2,000 mules. 2,000
mules, yeah. 2,000
I will say,
mules.
here's my issue with that documentary. They tried to play a math game to prove a conspiracy, but they didn't actually get any evidence to support the math game. What they basically said was, we got a whole bunch of cell phone data and we saw where people were going. And then we mapped out some people that went near like multiple boxes, and we've got camera footage and we think that these people are harvesting ballots. And it's like, okay, that's a really interesting foundation to build a hypothesis off of. But there are a couple of obvious problems. One, you're talking cities with millions of people. Two, you're talking people moving around a lot. And so then the question is like, well, how many people just naturally wander by a lot of these ballot boxes? Now, the reason why I say it's a very interesting hypothesis is because you can go on to prove it. And this actually was shocking to me, because I would have been ready to fight a lot harder, but I don't have to at all, actually. This is what Dinesh D'Souza needed to do. If you have all this footage, all this data, all this stuff, all you need to do to win over conservatives, it wouldn't be enough for me, but all you need to do is show me one person going to 2 ballot boxes. How did they not have a single instance of footage like that? Just show me one person going to 2 ballot boxes. Because the whole premise of your documentary is built on the idea that illegal ballot harvesters are going between NGOs, homes, and driving to all of these different ballot boxes to obscure the fact that they are illegally harvesting ballots. Then just show me video of one person going to 2 ballot boxes. And he couldn't produce a single instance of that. And then the problem is that the 2 ones that went really viral, one was a person that was showing up multiple times in scrubs. This person worked at a nearby nursing facility, and that was proven. Another was this black dude that put like 6 or 7 ballots in, and I think media found who that guy was. He's got like a family of like 7 or 8 people. He just dropped off ballots for him. And like those were the 2 big ones that got investigated. Okay, well then show me anything.
And that is a very good point, because you did not see in that documentary the same person go to 2 different ones.
Just
you just
one
saw
time.
Them kept going back to one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or just one person going to 1 ballot box one time with like 4 or 5 or 6 ballots. And it's like, you can turn them in for your family members, you know? Like, yeah.
Exactly.
But,
yeah. 100%. Let's see, Thomas, here are some shillings for you and Bonald today on this great stream question. But where do you see branching out platform-wise with your new tech places on the rise in order to become cancel cult mob proof?
I don't know. If I got banned from YouTube, I'd probably just fucking retire. Fuck it. Fuck this world.
Well, and according to Keffals, that you retire and become a nobody.
Yeah, true. Well, that's what retirement means. She did say that. She's like, he's gonna retire and become irrelevant. What is retirement if not irrelevancy? No fucking shit, right? That's like saying like, oh, he quit basketball and then he no longer played in the NBA. Yeah, no shit. That's what it means to quit basketball. Yeah, my whole job is being relevant somewhat online. Yeah, no shit. If I quit, I'm not gonna be relevant anymore. Yeah, it's stupid.
Oh, man. And then with the current decisions made by Twitch regarding the money dealings with creators, will there be a noticeable creator migration from there? Yes or no? What do you think?
I think it's coming. I think it'll be happening. I think they're going to get rid of Prime subs soon, and that's going to change a lot, but we'll see.
And I feel like that's happening with YouTube, going over to Rumble maybe, but the problem is that Rumble, and this is how it always starts, I feel, is it's like that's where the right goes. So then it like gets built up as like this neo-right like platform, and then people end up are like, okay, well there's like crazy people over there, like we don't want to be over there. So then all of a sudden like YouTube gets a resurgence, you know?
Yeah, no offense to conservatives, or take offense actually, I don't give a fuck. The problem with a lot of alternative media platforms that they keep running into over and over again, and I think they'll even admit this, Odyssey, Gab, all of these platforms, is that like some people do get banned unfairly. I think we can all agree that. I would say that for myself.
100%.
Obviously, okay? Most people that get banned probably deserved it. When you make platforms that only banned people go to, it's always going to be a horrible shit show that nobody like really wants to participate in. And I think like that's the problem that a lot of these alternative media companies run into. It's like, okay, I want users that aren't fucking crazy. Okay, I don't want all of the banned Nazis and KKK members from Twitter on my platform. I want normal people too. But those people start to overwhelmingly make up the demographics of those alternative media platforms, which like completely inhibits their future growth, which is rough. But
yeah, and that's I agree with that, because you do get I mean, it's the internet. I mean, look at like Kiwi Farms or,
Mm-hmm.
what was it, 4chan, 8chan, all that other stuff. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the internet can be a pretty crazy
For
place.
sure,
If
yeah.
not, it is a crazy place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lucas Roberts can complain and whine, drinking his moonshine on his Simps dime. May Lucas help decorate the halls and walls for us all. Oh God, there we go.
I will say, and I've said it, I'll say it here, just to be loud and clear, I do not support any transphobic attacks on Keffals or Clara. I use their real name, I use their proper pronouns, so heads up on, because I know somebody's going to clip that and say I support that dono. I disavow that dono, so okay.
And I am also against any attacks, and definitely not transphobic, and support no attacks against any transgender peoples. Genome Jumpsteiny, please confront Destiny and hold him accountable. Make him acknowledge that Destiny is in fact a girl's name.
I disagree, but
Destiny, it's an idea, a thought with no gender.
well, if it's
I
a
feel.
thought, no, I'm just kidding. I know what you mean.
Or the future.
Yeah,
or
it's a
karma.
noun. Okay, nouns can be whatever we want them to be. Okay.
Exactly. The real question is, when will Destiny be playing Fortnite? Poggers.
Who? Okay. I've done a really good job at not fighting with anybody in chat because I try not to, but I read all the chats. Someone in your chat just said, Carla Vegas. Okay. She's got a green name. I don't know if that means she's a member. She says, do not mess with hormones, period. Does that mean she's opposed to female birth control? Does that mean she's opposed to men that are on TRT? Does that, like, what? People always make these absolute statements, and I don't think they actually mean them. But
I think what they're referring to,
yeah, they're probably referring to minors that are using puberty blockers. That's probably what they're meaning to get at. But when you make these absolute overwhelming statements where it's like, oh, I don't believe in this thing. We're like, really? Like, do you really not believe in this thing at all? Like, okay.
Right. And that is one thing, where I think that, we're at an age where you're going to have to be a lot more specific on, like you said, don't mess with hormones. Well, what does that mean? And that's, I guess it would have to be don't mess with children's hormones,
Sure, maybe, yeah. There's a lot of baggage to unpack there,
Exactly.
When people are saying certain things, like a lot of people support gender affirming surgery and they don't realize it, like men that have gynecomastia, that's a gynecomastia, that's a totally natural thing. It grows, it happens. Sometimes you got man boobs and sometimes they get surgery so that they can look more like men. That's gender affirming surgery. Arguably, you could say a lot of plastic surgery that women get is in a way gender affirming surgery. People getting bigger boobs, people getting smoother skin, people doing lip fillers, people doing whatever. But yeah, just lots of thoughts. But yeah, we don't have to dig into all that.
Good God, you could say that there's way more body dysmorphia shit going on in fucking LA than there is in the frickin' transgender population that's like, what, 0.01% or whatever the hell it is?
Sure.
Not a lot more in LA, yeah. From Keffals, tell Steven to leave me alone.
Nice, spaced.
Yeah, exactly. Sausage Lord, ask him his thoughts on Senator John Zarka.
On Senator John Zerka. Oh, it's a person on my stream. That's a meme. That guy's a dumb fuck. Sorry, God.
Okay. Oh God. Does she know about dog warts?
No, you don't want to know about dog warts. Don't worry about that. It's weird.
Do you know about Lindsey Graham's ladybugs?
No? What's that? Do I want to know?
You ready for this? You ready for this?
Yeah, give me. Yeah. I'm ready.
Hang on. Hang on, let me pull it up. Oh boy. So this from the wonderful places of the internet.
Okay.
Yeah, let me pull it up here. All right. So this was posted to a Reddit 2 years ago, and it was a Reddit stream or a Reddit thread of sex workers in Washington, D.C.
Oh, I think I have heard this. Was this the guy that tweeted out that he'd had like these encounters with Lindsey Graham or whatever? That he was like a. Oh wait, no, I haven't seen this.
Okay.
I've heard things about Lindsey Graham, but not this thing.
Okay, this one is okay. Let me just remove dog warts. Okay. And this is posted to a sex workers Reddit page of people that do things with people in Washington, D.C. And it says, when I came out of the bathroom, he was on the bed, naked on all fours. I noted that there were dark marks around his anus. I asked if he had showered. He said yes. I asked if it was okay if I wiped him down. He said sure. I wet a face towel and wiped and wiped and wiped between his buttocks, but nothing was coming off. Then I realized that his taint wasn't dirty. It was just full of moles. dark moles and dense clusters up and down the length of his taint. "Aw," he said, "hope you don't mind. Those are just my little ladybugs." I ran out of there. Now you know what I see in my mind anytime he comes up in the news. Any escort he's hired should be able to verify this. Of Senator Lindsey Graham.
Okay.
So,
I could have gone my whole life without knowing that, but thank you.
Exactly. Now I will say there have been actual articles that are like, yeah, your chat is just going nuts. There have been articles where somebody said that this is not factual and all this other stuff, and then like a bunch of other people's encounters started coming out of the same thing. This is all alleged, folks, but this was one of the first things that I heard when I got to DC, and I was like, you have got to be kidding. Again, just like you, I could have gone my entire life without knowing that. And then finally, is bankrupting the West worth the cost of defeating Putin? The Ukraine has a history of conflict for centuries. It's basically been a border country going back to ancient Rome.
We're not bankrupting ourselves, but two, it is important that it means something to have the support of the United States. I think that's an important thing for countries to know, that the United States will stand up for democracy, as cheesy as it sounds, around the world. That's an important thing for the United States to do. And in terms of Ukraine having a history of conflict, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but I mean, since 91, they have borders that were internationally recognized, and Russia has violated that. And one of the really important rules that we've written in the world since post-World War II even, is generally you're not supposed to fuck with countries' like territorial integrity or sovereignty. Going into countries and stealing pieces of them is just a really archaic way of doing things, and we really should be against countries ever thinking that they can do that. It's just not good.
Great note to end on. Well, Stephen, I got to tell you, thank you again so much. I personally never thought you were going to reach out.
Okay.
Reach back out, but I'm really glad that you did. And like I said, I loved having this. There were things we agree on, things we disagree on. There were so many things that we touched base on. And like I said, anytime you want to come back, feel free. Anytime you want to debate somebody that, you know, your chat may like, may not like, I'm available. So this was awesome. And again, thank you so much. Where can people find you that want to follow you?
Yeah, youtube.com/destiny, instagram.com/destiny. That's all I got for now.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. I really appreciate it. And have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, folks. That was awesome. And that's truthfully, I think the way that you do it. That's the way that you
like
have debates.
right now.
I learned a lot. Maybe he learned a lot. I don't know. But I think it's just one of these things where I'm super, super thankful. And I love having just conversations like that, especially when it comes to foreign policy. So with that said, folks, as I always say, wherever that...
Oh, I didn't play my TikTok. My TikTok dude is molding.